humans have butts.
We do.
And you got two separate
What?
butt cheeks, okay?
You have two butt cheeks.
You have butt?
You have two separate butt cheeks. And so
And we're back on our podcast.
51.
Episode 51. One away, Colty, from a full year. Congratulations.
We did it. We did it.
Crazy to think about that. Like literally one episode away from a full year at this thing.
Yeah.
Couple quick things I want to do. If you haven't already, please give us a subscribe, like, comment, review, whatever. I'll mention the name Kevin Tolbert, who's the winner of our combo kit for our buck roar.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, Kevin.
So I sent Kevin a message. I think he was on YouTube. Sent him a message. He's supposed to send us his address to our email, and we'll get that out.
The winner of a new grunt tube.
In the same right, we're going to do a Stealth Cam Fusion for this week. We'll do AT&T or Verizon, so you tell us. But obviously, it's something that Jared and I are pretty much addicted to, and just a great, piece of equipment for Intel real time. So
they're solid cameras, man, for the price
Killer.
point. Like, dude, we're not just,
We've used
we're
everybody's.
sticklers for equipment that works, and there are higher end cameras out there. There's no doubt. But ultimately, what I think it comes down to is reliability for these things, and they do work.
Been awesome.
They do work.
So we're going to give away a Stealth Cam Fusion X. If you want an AT or T or Verizon, whenever we contact the winner, just tell us. We'll ship it right to your house. So it's December, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, this is airing next week.
16th?
This is Christmas week. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, just about.
Merry Christmas.
Are you done Christmas shopping, by the way?
I don't know. Probably.
Yeah.
I quit. That was me kicking
You
stuff.
broke your chair.
Yeah, I broke the chair too. I think I'm done. Man, I'm already, we kind of talked about this before. I'm already thinking about 2022 management deer. In fact, I got a guy coming Monday to take a look at opening up about 1.5 acres to 2 acres behind the house for a big food plot there.
Are you going to try to get it back out after that 200? Well, think about this, dude.
If he's alive,
you've got
I haven't even seen him.
You've got a month and a half to get it done.
I know. I still got plenty of time. And frankly, I like the
Plenty
late
of
season. And I'm also closing on my Ohio place. Who knows? Might see something there before the season's over.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't seen any shooters in Columbus. Like, not a deer. I don't know what's going on. Pressure. Those guys are gun hunting again this weekend. So
it's pressure.
I've got a ton of deer in Kentucky. That's exciting. But if anything, I really want to try to get Carter to shoot a buck with his bow before the season's out. I've got lots of bucks coming through there.
Yeah.
Nothing that I'm real excited about, but for future years, for sure. So I don't know. Speaking of which, these are all pressured deer we're talking about at this point in the year.
Yeah, for better or worse.
For better, for worse. And so we have, I don't know, some would say maybe the foremost expert in hunting pressured whitetails on the podcast today.
I hope he doesn't take this as derogatory. Definitely the oldest guest we've had so far, right?
John looks great.
Yeah, and with age comes experience. I can't believe he's 70 years old.
He looks great.
That's crazy. I would have guessed like early 60s.
He's like, I'll saddle my ass up in the tree way before you do.
He's definitely still saddle hunting.
I love it. So we got John Eberhart on today, and anybody that's in whatever, it's Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Minnesota, all these pressured states, John has long been a source of just critical information for finding big bucks on public land. The guy's got an entire wall of Pope and Young bucks from Michigan public land.
Yep.
And again, per what we just said, one of the original saddle guys, like to a T. In fact, he has his own signature saddle. I think with tethered.
Yep.
So,
and I think an announcement for us today, something pretty
cool.
cool.
He's got an announcement.
We'll leave it for him, but I know he's going to talk about some kind of a cool setup having to do with saddle hunting.
Yeah. So, this one is our tribute to the saddle hunters out there, I would say.
And the public land pressured deer.
Yeah, man. Which most of you guys are
ScentLok wearing son of a gun.
You're better than me. That's for damn sure. But excited to have John on. Truly an honor to have this guy on here to talk about it. And we're saying this now because the podcast hasn't been recorded yet. I don't know where we'll end up through this thing, but by the time we come out, our heads are going to be spinning, man. Yeah. So let's bring in the leader, John Eberhart. There he is.
Oh.
Yes.
Just proofreading some stuff, you know?
And I rep for Allen, and I'm looking through their new 2020, seeing what's new.
There you go, man. Well, listen, John, Jared and I were just saying, truly appreciate you coming on the podcast today. For our listeners and for ourselves, I mean, we don't know where this podcast is going to go, but I'm sure all of us will have heads spinning after it because, for a long time, if you think about these highly, dense hunter states where the core whitetail guys are, you have been essentially a huge source of information to, lead us all to become more successful hunters because the fact is, we're in a way competing against each other in these highly dense states for a limited resource, which would be, a big buck, a mature buck, a pope and young deer, whatever it might be. And so I think that we're all anxious to kind of be able to pick your brain and really understand, your philosophy around being successful in some of these situations.
Well, it's my pleasure to be on this podcast, and you are absolutely right. I have hunted in Michigan, which is the most heavily bow hunted state in the country, and we're also a 2-buck state, which makes it that much worse. I've hunted here for 55 seasons, started in the mid 60s, and I've hunted in some states out west. I went to Missouri, Iowa, Kansas, Illinois, and it's just a night and day difference. I mean, there's been years in Kansas I'll see 18 pope and young bucks, whereas in Michigan I've hunted as many as 3 years, and everything I do is on public land or free knock-on doors for permission properties. And there's been 3 years where I haven't seen a pope and young buck, during bow season, and that's hunting 2.5 months per year. And I'll see 12 to 18, as many as 18 in 1 week. Wow. In a Kansas or an Iowa. Yeah. So, and they're just a lot easier to kill. There's a lot more of them. They're very easy to rattle in and, decoy in. They are very susceptible to tactics because the rut's so competitive because there's so many mature bucks, and it's just a different world. So I kind of write information out there that blue collar hunters that are hunting public land or small parcels that get pounded to death in PA, West Virginia, New York, Michigan, up in the northeastern states and the eastern states where that's where the biggest amount of the general population of the country is. And so that's where it gets the most hunting pressure. And because I've done it for so many years and I've been really successful, I did not have a mentor growing up. I learned everything on my own. I learned by hard knocks. And I always like to pass on that information because, everybody's got limited time. So if I can shorten people's learning curve, that's my goal. So I try to pass on information for hunting pressure deer, which is totally 100% different than hunting in those other states, like TV guys do. Even when you go out to Kansas, or when I go out there, I'm hunting on free walk-on properties or free permission or public. And it's super easy compared to Michigan, but yet that's still not even remotely close to what the TV guys are hunting out there when they're on their leases.
Yeah.
But I can only imagine, as easy as it is for me to go out there and just hunt regular public properties or free walk-ons. I can't even fathom, I should say, how easy and simple it would be on managed properties out in those states.
Yeah.
It's another world. And until you've done it and you can compare the two, you can't relate to it.
Yeah. John, I'm really curious to hear, and just like a little bit of background. So Jeremy and I love hearing about why, different guys are passionate about different aspects of hunting, period. Whether it's bow hunting or gun hunting or public or private land or whichever aspect it is that's like most appealing. I think we find that really fascinating to say, man, what is it that makes this guy tick? Part two of that is, don't
give me too many parts, or I'll forget.
Part two. This is all further. I'll take it. I'm curious because I think we know quite a few guys who, whether from the East or from the far West, that got a taste of the Midwest, these states that you're talking about, Iowa, Kansas, whatever it is, and they moved there. They're like, that's what I want. I'm going to up and move. So I'm really curious that you kind of went the other direction, whereas it sounds like, you just dug your heels in a little further in the East Coast. You're like, I'm going to make this work, and I'm going to find, how to achieve my passion here.
A very, very valid point. I've seen that a lot here. People struggle. You watch TV guys. I know several hunters that had TV shows, very high profile TV shows. And they've killed 50, 60, 70 Pope and Young bucks on their shows out west. It's all out west. Right. It's all out west on either, or else it's on pay to hunt ranches in like Ohio or Indiana or something like that. Yet they've never killed a Pope and Young buck in Michigan.
Right.
They killed 50, 60, 70 of them out of state, never shot one in Michigan, and they've hunted here all their life and most of them on property. So it's just so much more difficult. And my passion for bow hunting is not just about the kill. I love going out, sitting in a tree an hour and a half before daylight, watching the sun come up, watching the squirrels come out of their nest, watching a buzzard land on a dead tree out in the middle of the swamp and undo his wings to get the dew off his wings so he can fly away, watching a squirrel make the first tracks in a fresh snow in the morning, having owls try and attack my eyes right at the edge of darkness, and you have to move out of the way or they take your eyeballs out. I've had that happen 3 times. Just the whole nature thing and the up close, and it's personal. I gun hunted for quite a few years until 1991, and I'm 70 years old. And I have nothing against it. I probably own 40 guns. It just lost its luster to me. I just like that up close challenge to get a mature buck up close and personal within 25 yards. Yeah. Most of my shots have been 12 to 20. And I just love that up close and personal thing. And I have no interest. I have had pay to hunt ranches call me and say, hey, you can come out here and hunt for free in lieu of you saying something nice on your YouTube channel or, in an hunting article for deer hunting or something. And there's no way I would do that. That's taking the easy way out. I don't like easy. It's like crossbows. Crossbows are easy. I know so many damn hunters that as soon as crossbows were legal, full inclusion in all these states, they quit using vertical bows because they never have to practice and they double their shooting distance.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm not one of those guys that like the easy route. I want to work hard. I want to know that when I kill a mature buck, I earned it. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a freebie, because anymore, the United States is kind of somewhat turning into a European style hunting where only the wealthy get to hunt and have access to those big pieces of property and those managed lands. And you can buy anything anymore. You just buy land, keep everybody off and manage it and grow a lot of big bucks, and just by the odds of bucks on your property, you're going to get your opportunities like the TV guys. That doesn't interest me in the slightest. I want to earn what I kill, whether I have to use a canoe or waders to cross rivers or cross a lake and drag it out by myself and damn near have a heart attack like I did this year through a swamp. And, I just like to earn things. And I know there's a lot of other guys that do that as well. And like I mentioned, Chad Sylvester from Exodus, he had that phenomenal family property in Ohio, and he killed 2 monster bucks on it. And he abandoned that because public land hunting is becoming so prevalent now. And he went 5 years without killing a buck when he could have went to that family property and shot a monster buck every year. There's a lot of younger people that like to earn what they kill, and older people as well. But that's kind of the mindset I've always been in. And I just always want to help people become better hunters.
Can I stir the pot out of the gate?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So John, and I kind of, when I grew up hunting in Pennsylvania, right? So I was one of those guys that, when I was 12 years old, I could see a herd of 30 doe come through and not a single buck, in the group. And, there were guys everywhere, and kind of in that same mindset that you had. Like, I still, especially now with kids, like I still gun hunt, but like I live to bow hunt, and half the time during gun season, I'm still hunting with a bow, even if I'm in Pennsylvania. I think it was 2013 was the first time I went. Basically I left Pennsylvania and moved away, and I hunted Kansas. And I remember the first experience out there was like, whoa, this is what deer hunting is.
Different.
And it was in a weird way though, because I said this is what deer hunting is just because it was like overwhelming, the amount of bucks and chasing and rutting activity and everything.
Everything you've always dreamed about in Pennsylvania was unfolding right in front of you.
To John's
It's never
point,
gonna happen.
yeah, to John's point, kind of what I see on TV. That said, in a weird way, you know, and that was what 7-8 years ago. Like I've almost come back to like I kind of miss some of the challenge. I say some lightly because there are some things that are frustrating of how I grew up hunting in Pennsylvania. And I don't know if it's because it was easy necessarily, because it wasn't every year that I killed a buck. I killed a bunch of bucks out there. But ultimately there was something different about it. And so I lead that question a little bit in that, do you think some of the people who grew up hunting Michigan, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, et cetera, when they go out to the Midwest, do you think that their hunting skills are at such a high level that their success is greater?
No question about it. Absolutely. Chad Sylvester from Exodus Cameras, he has told me after that Cribs video, actually.
Yep.
He said, you know what? Every hunter that I've ever interviewed from Michigan, and usually when he's interviewing somebody from, you know, a PA or a Michigan or New York, they're guys with pretty high standards. They've done well in their home states.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, every one of them, whenever they go out west, they always have a very high kill percentage. I mean, myself, I've went out 25 times out of state. I've taken 20 Pope and Young bucks up to 180 inches in 25 trips. And on 4 of those trips, I could have shot Pope and Young bucks, but I had my criteria set at 140 or 50, depending on the year in the state. So 24 out of the 25 1-week trips, I could have killed PNY bucks. I did on 20 of them, but I could have on 4 others. I just chose not to, something that small. And back to your point, Jared, I know a lot of guys in Michigan. There's quite a few that all they do is hunt out of state now. They go to Ohio, they go to Indiana, they go to Iowa. You can only go every 4 years, but they'll go to Nebraska, they'll go to the Dakotas. You know, they'll take 3 or 4 different weeks and go on different trips. And I do know a few that have moved out of state just to kill big bucks. And I can't even fathom wrapping my head around moving just to kill a big buck every year. There's a lot more to life than that. I golf and I fish a lot. I do a lot of other things. I have a lot of other interests, and to just move someplace and move your family just to kill a buck every year, because usually all those states are 1 buck states. Yeah. I have a hard time wrapping my head around that. And the guys that have done that, you know what's interesting? When they lived in Michigan and then they would go out of state and kill a big buck and bring it back, you know, everybody's, wow, man, you're awesome, blah, blah, blah. Well, when you live out there and you kill 150-inch buck, you ain't squat.
Exactly.
It's relative.
That's just another
for sure.
Yes.
Well, that's part of the big appeal for us is we get to bring it back and say, like, well, dude, we don't get this at home.
Yeah.
And so, John, no pressure to convert me. And like, I'm almost ashamed to say, Jeremy and I live here in Pennsylvania. I haven't bought a tag here in 5, 6, 7 years. Haven't bought a tag. And the main reason for that is my parents have a farm in eastern central Ohio, which is pretty close to here. And so it's not like I'm heading way out to the Midwest. It's still somewhat pressured ground, but it's just we just have a piece there.
You have access.
I have access there. And for the first time ever, I killed a 170-inch buck in Ohio this year with my bow. And that,
congratulations.
Thank you. That was the step that, like, as of that moment, I started to feel like I need to bring it back home. Like I started to feel like I had set up a situation there that I could replicate. And that kind of gave me the freedom to come back to this, home state of Pennsylvania and start to maybe figure it out, even though I know it's going to be hard. That's why I'm so curious to understand, like, your mindset around, like, because frankly, I'm one of those guys that's like, I'll move to Iowa. Like, there's nothing keeping me here.
That's what I was going to say is, like, here, and obviously not pitting the opposites here, but here's Jared at 28, here's John at 70. John is telling you there are more things to life than moving out of state to kill a buck. Yeah. Here's you at 28 thinking, like, what?
Well, and so let's go into that conversation knowing that I have no, like, qualms about it. Like, I really respect where you're coming from, and so, like, you're probably right. Let's say that.
I will say this about Iowa. because if you did move to Iowa,
It's like, well, if it's
you'd get 2 buck tags every year as opposed to 1 every 4 years.
3. You get 3
buck tags.
Yep, as a landowner.
Okay, yeah. So
there's that.
if you revolve your entire life around deer hunting, yeah, Iowa would be the state to be. For sure.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Jot that down.
Yeah. So we record that, send that to your wife.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we're waiting 5 years here to drop 1 tag to go out there.
I think John makes a good point, and I want to kind of fishtail into this, not to segment these guys out, but one of the things, so Jared and I usually go to Kansas every year. This year we didn't get drawn. And what we've seen even there and in Southern Illinois when we were hunting public too is the amount of crossbow guys. Like simply what I think is guys who were gun hunters who said, oh, I can pick up a crossbow and hunt a lot longer and a lot earlier. The amount of guys hunting crossbow has essentially changed Kansas from a pretty much every year state for archery to now you need a preference point to be guaranteed to draw. And it'll in Southern Illinois, I mean, every public parking lot was loaded mostly with crossbow guys. And so it's changed this archery dynamic to where I hunted archery because there were less people. I did have more time, but it was less pressure. I could get in there to now every parking lot on public especially is full guys.
Yeah. Hunting public has lent a lot to that too. The hunting public guys have really popularized hunting public land. They've made it cool to hunt public land and kill a 90-inch, 2.5-year-old.
No doubt.
Yep. And also what you said with the full inclusion crossbows, I was very involved in that in Michigan. The NRC, our Natural Resources Commission, 10 Point was after them big time. Chuck Jordan was the national sales manager for 10 Point at the time, and they knew if they could get Michigan to topple to full inclusion crossbow, that the rest of the states would fall in line like dominoes because we were the biggest bow hunting state, and that's exactly what happened.
Wow.
And it has really changed gun hunter numbers in Michigan and every other state that has full inclusion crossbow, because exactly what you said, Jeremy, gun hunters bought crossbows and they get to hunt during nice weather. They actually get to watch social activity instead of you're trying to find a place to hide.
Yep.
And they're filling their tags before gun season, so they're not gun hunting. So yeah, that's filling up public lands and private lands as well, because gun hunters are converting to crossbows. And there's a lot of hunters that didn't like to practice, and they're shooting crossbows now because they never have to practice and they can shoot a lot farther. I can't even, I had so many friends. Oh yeah, I'm an avid bow hunter. I've never shoot crossbows. As soon as full inclusion came around, they bought their Ravens and 10 points, and they never have to practice.
Never look back.
They can 70 yards instead of 30.
Yeah.
I watched a video of a guy with his 13-year-old daughter shoot a buck at 83 yards with a Raven crossbow. He filmed the whole thing. He had a lit knock, no wind, big 9-point out in the hayfield. And that's bow hunting. Come on.
So, John, I want to kind of fishtail this back to your, obviously, you've been bow hunting these kind of places and these deer for a long time. Talk about maybe some of the evolution. I think our listeners would be really cool from even like, I grew up hunting in the 90s and early 2000s. I started in the 90s, but my family had hunted 60s, 70s, 80s.
I was born in the 90s.
Yeah, so there you go. So, but I really would like to know more from your side, John, in terms of like, were there periods in like the 80s or even early 90s where you're like, wow, this was the pinnacle. Like there were so many deer, I could find mature bucks. Archery wasn't as popular as it was. And then even translating to now to talking about all-inclusive crossbows, like I have to imagine it's more difficult for what you are trying to do, right?
The crossbows put more hunters in during bow season, which makes it more difficult, but it was far more difficult in the 70s and 80s.
Okay.
Far, not even remotely close, because back in the 70s, we had a ton of deer. When I moved up north in 1972, I moved up north because there was a lot of deer in northern Michigan, and I hated living by Detroit.
Wait a minute. Did I just hear you say you moved to a place because there's a lot of deer there?
I did. Well, my primary
That didn't take long.
I hated living near Detroit.
Well, we can't blame you.
Yeah, we understand that.
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity to move north, so I did. The deer had something to do with it, but I wanted out of Detroit and working in those little shithole factories. But I do have to say one thing about crossbows really quick. Crossbows have their place. They have their place for people with health issues or that can't draw enough poundage because they were too old or too young or whatever. So when I say I have issue with crossbows, it's just for healthy people.
I mean,
Understood.
My 6 and 9-year-old both shoot crossbow, and it's an amazing way to get them involved to where they can't effectively kill a bow with a compound bow right now. Can't pull enough weight.
Yeah.
Well,
what was the question you asked me a second ago?
Wait. And before we go to that, I'm curious. When you said you were involved earlier with Michigan's like the rollout of the crossbow with the all-inclusion rule, were you advocating for in favor of that?
Oh,
like against?
No.
Okay.
I actually wrote a petition. I almost
see.
got fired from my job. I wrote a petition. I had the top 38 sporting goods stores in the state sign it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, when you look at a crossbow, it's like this. A crossbow is like a baseball cap. It's a one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're an archery pro shop or you're a large independent selling guns, bows, and stuff, you know, consumers that are getting into bow hunting, they have to come in. They have to be fit. They have to have the right draw length, the right poundage, the right arrows, the right spline, the right broadheads for flight. There's a lot of things that revolve around, you know, being somebody. You need a technician to line you up with everything. A crossbow, you buy it and you buy some bolts and you go shoot it. It's a one size fits all. So obviously, when I knew that when crossbows, if they became legal for everybody, the mass merchants were going to sell the most because they buy the most product. Therefore,
100%.
they get it at the lowest price. Therefore, they can sell it at the lowest retail.
Yep.
So it was going to hurt independent retail stores where you could go in and talk to somebody that actually knew something about a product.
Right.
So I had issue with that. And I just also had issue with a crossbow. Bow season was implemented for a reason. It was implemented for people that shot bows, that had to practice to stay good and shoot good. It wasn't for something you shoulder and pull the trigger and you hold on to a front stock like a gun. That's not what it was designed for. I mean, anybody that says there's no difference between a crossbow and a vertical bow is insane.
It's obvious, right?
Yeah. So, you know, me and Bob Eastman, who owned Eastman Outdoors, who they own Gorilla Tree Stands and Carbon Express, you know, we were trying to appease them so there would be some middle ground. Yeah. And maybe do 55 years and older across the counter.
Yeah.
You know,
or a limited series or something like that, or limited season rather.
Or a limited season after gun season, not a limited season during bow season.
Right.
You know, they were trying to say during this thing, well, there's a lot of avid crossbow shooters out there. That's BS. There are not a lot of avid. I have never seen a crossbow league.
That's an oxymoron, an avid crossbow hunter.
Yeah.
I've seen tons of vertical bow leagues, and every archery shop has a bow league.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of those went by the wayside because so many people are converting to crossbows. But anyway, that's another topic. It's done. It's over.
Yeah.
It
We're in it.
Yep.
So my question was, and you were getting into it, John, you moved in 72, you said you moved from Detroit to the north.
Yes.
And even though you had a lot of deer, it was harder.
Yes, because nowadays there are a pretty high percentage of bow hunters, and you three sitting there are probably prime examples of this.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are passing up deer.
Yes.
Back in the 70s and 80s, if it had 3-inch spikes, I don't care who you were, that buck was getting shot at.
Mm-hmm.
In 1978, statistically, I'm a big stats guy. You know, I'm not bloviating with BS. I'm a stats guy. In 1978, I talked to the DNR, and 2% of bow hunters killed an antlered buck with a bow in Michigan. 2%. Now it's almost 30%.
Wow.
So, and we had 1 million gun hunters. We had almost 1 million gun hunters.
Wow.
And they shot every damn antlered buck that they could see.
Yeah.
So we just didn't have the mature bucks they have now. It wasn't even remotely close. If you shot a 2.5-year-old 85-inch 8-point, you could very possibly win the city's or the county's buck contest.
Yep.
I mean, there just were not the bucks there are now. Now you have a lot of guys that manage their property. They got kill criterias. A lot of guys are passing up. Almost everybody passes up 1.5-year olds anymore. And a lot of guys pass up 2-year-olds. And some pass up 3. Mm-hmm. So there's just a lot bigger bucks now than there used to be. That did not used to exist.
Yeah. Yeah. So it wasn't necessarily that it was, in the 70s and 80s that it was lack of deer. It was just a lack of selection in that, you saw that spike 3-inch spike came through. He died.
Oh, I shot at anything that had 3-inch spikes of it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
makes sense. Do you think that who, I guess this isn't a loaded question either, who in your opinion has led to hunters basically deciding the pass bucks? Do you think it's the state? Do you think it's TV guys? Do you think it's other people?
Well, I think the TV guys laid that foundation there.
They did.
Yep, TV guys back in the mid 90s, they came on and they were shooting big bucks. Then everybody, after a while, everybody wants to kill bigger bucks because that's what they see the TV. I mean, God, I talk to kids nowadays that are 20 years old and they've never killed a buck because they don't want to shoot anything unless it's 125. Well, if you're in Michigan and you're on public land, you may never shoot a buck for the rest of your life. If you put up 125 as a criteria, because that's what they see on TV or on Facebook.
Yeah. Well, and I worry about that. I've got young kids and I've talked to a lot of other ones who have older kids than I do, John, and that, I worry about that in that when I hunted, like first year I killed was a button buck, then I killed a spike, then I killed an 8-point, and I mean, we're talking 1.5-year-old, 2.5-year-olds. Like I worry that kind of training progressed me to always want something bigger or older or more challenging, whatever you want to put it, to today. Some of these guys are walking onto manicured 280-acre farms that they're hunting multiple 150s.
Absolutely.
And where do you go? Like if let's just say I'm 18 years old and I go out and I'm killing 150s with my bows and 160s with where do you go from there?
You don't. You just keep killing those bucks. I mean, that's you know what, you did it right. You did the natural progression.
That's just how it was. I didn't even have a choice. That's just how it was when I grew up. You killed a small buck and you progressed up.
Yeah. The whole, I look at sports icons. You look at Tom Brady. You look at Phil Mickelson, Tiger Woods, LeBron James, Michael Phelps. Those guys all became sports icons of whatever sport they were involved in by competing against people in middle school and then going to high school. And if they were good enough in high school, they got a scholarship to college, sports scholarship. And if they were good enough in college, then they got drafted into the pros. And then if they were standouts in the pros, then they hit that icon status. But one thing they all have in common, to reach that icon status, they all played against everybody else on the same football field, the same baseball diamonds, the same golf courses. They got that good by competing against other people. In the hunting industry, that is not the case. TV guys, there's probably 30% of all the bow hunters in the country could go to Lakoski's or Lee and Tiffany or Drury's property and kill bucks equally what they kill, if not better. But you couldn't take those guys and put them on public land. They wouldn't kill squat because they have no clue how to hunt pressure deer. So, sports icons have earned it against competition throughout their career. A lot of the icons in the hunting industry have not earned it because they've never killed anything where they had to compete against anybody. That's one thing I like to do. I like to compete. That way, when I kill something nice, I know I killed it against competition. That's the draw of bow hunting pressure.
That's very interesting.
I think it's a valid point. It's why I said about, coming from different states or even again, and it's kind of just the way I was. We talked about this earlier. I came out of college. I didn't have anywhere to hunt. So what did I do? I went and hunted hard on public land and tried to kill mature bucks on public land. It was just, that was the natural progression. And I think that, where I get concerned about my own kids is like, they hunt a lot of the land that I have access to, whether I own it or lease or whatever. And it's like, they don't read sign like I had to read sign. Or even when I'm hunting a non-pressure deer, like I'm picking up on sign just because that's how I trained myself over the last 20 plus years. And they're like, they don't even know what I'm looking at.
Well, I've never heard it explained that way, John. And like, if I could feedback like a using the same analogy or whatever, I've always thought of like the competition being between myself and the animal. And like, it's a different animal maybe from year to year, or it's a different, setting based on what farm we're doing this. And like the human element would essentially be like, if I'm playing a video game, like my kid nephew coming in and like smacking the controller while I'm trying to like have the competition, as opposed to like I'm competing with other people. Like up until
If
this
you
point,
want to, if you want to personally set goals for yourself and compete, set goals where you're competing against yourself to try and kill a specific animal, that's a little bit different.
Yeah.
But then when you kill several monster animals in successive years, 1 year after the other, like TV guys are doing 4 and 5 years, they go to so many different states, and they post them on TV, they got their TV shows, they become, because they get so many followers, oh, you're so awesome, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, nearly half the bow hunters in the country could do the same thing on the same property.
Yeah.
So, because they have zero competition. Yeah. So they're not competing against a specific deer for personal reasons. They're doing it because they've reached that area of notoriety where they think they're awesome hunters. And, all these other people are feeding their egos. So that's why they post it all.
Well, and probably where Jeremy and I would be like blinded to that perspective is like, that's not under our belt. Like, we haven't killed a bunch of monsters in successional years to the point where we're like, okay, anybody can do this. Like, we can do this. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, if when asked honestly, some of those guys, the Lukoskis, the Drurys, whoever you want to point to, it's like, is that enough at some point? Is the challenge of, a new animal, because each animal has individual characteristics and mannerisms and stuff, like, is that enough to keep it fresh with the same weapon on?
There's got to be a fine line there, though, because I mean, the one thing
that, keep in mind, that's their living.
And that interferes with a fair answer.
And I guess where I'm at on it is, I remember my dad still tells me this to this day. He's like, man, I don't care what deer it is, like, if you shoot a deer and you're not like shaken, worked up, excited, we all get the shakes after we shoot a deer or whatever, that you're just, if you lose that feeling, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And I would have to say, I can't speak for them, but I bet a lot of those guys don't feel that anymore.
You're absolutely right. And I'm in the industry. I know a lot of these guys. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm, obviously I don't know the guys I mentioned, or I wouldn't have said that, but I've got a real good friend I've known for 40 years. He had one of the highest profile archery shows on TV, and he lives in Michigan, and he killed, I think, 58 or more, Pope and Young bucks, on when he had his TV show. And he owns 80 acres in Michigan. I don't think he's ever shot 120 inch buck in Michigan in his life.
Yeah, right.
Life. Now he's retired from the TV show, and he said, I enjoy hunting on my property and trying to kill a 3-year-old buck on my property way more than any of those monster bucks all well.
So I think that ties into your comment there, Jared, because like even though like we do hunt a lot of public, but we also have our own private access, and that private isn't, I don't want to say spoiled, but it isn't to this level where I'm hunting multiple 150s every year. Like, if I see a mature buck on my property, regardless of score, like that is the win for me. Like, that's the one I'm going after. Yeah. We don't have those properties. Again, no knock to whoever it is, but I don't own 1,000 acres in Iowa that I have multiple booners even running on. Like, I've never even seen that before. I can't relate to how that would even feel. Versus like, we have I own a property, but if I kill a 3-year-old on my Pennsylvania property, like, I'm learning quickly now that this is what my expectation should be on that property.
I had a gentleman in the industry, and I have no idea why he did this. He came to one of my workshops this spring. I had one in May because of COVID. I only had one. And, during the seminar day, which was Sunday, he actually said to the class, he hunted a property, I think it was in Southern Illinois, a managed property, and he saw 4 booners in one set, 4 different booners. And this was not an enclosure. This was just a managed piece of property. And I know I had a good friend that owned 320 acres in Iowa, and on his property, they wouldn't lift the bow off the hook unless it was 170 inches. And I'm a little hypocritical myself, because I love going out there. I love going out there because there's so many, everybody likes to see big bone.
Yeah.
But I know where my roots are. My roots are hunting pressured property here and trying to kill the best property, the best buck on the property. And, my standards are way lower here than out there. People always should look at where they're hunting and put their expectations their expectations should not be beyond what that property can produce.
No doubt.
Well, and I think to your TV point, that's been the fatal flaw is if I'm like growing up and, you know, back in the 90s and stuff, it was TNN, the Nashville network, right? That was Sunday nights. That's when the shows were on and stuff. But you watch these shows and guys on those shows would go and kill, you know, 180-inch deer in Kansas or Texas or wherever. And I'm sitting in Pennsylvania. I'm like, man, like maybe I shouldn't be shooting that. And it's like, no, dude, like those don't exist right now around you. Like,
absolutely. Those do not exist.
but we got in our head that like, oh, like these guys are, to John's point, the icon. Like if I want to be an icon, which I did, I wanted to, at least I thought I did, like then I need to go, like I have to kill 170 and 80-inch deer. But the problem is that expectation was nowhere close to realistic during that time frame where I was and what I was hunting.
Yeah. That's one thing that is, to talk about myself, I guess, for a minute, that's one thing that has got me to the place I am. I have never allowed killing a big buck to overtake what I want to pass on to other hunters. You know, how can I put this into words? I get lots of opportunities to go places, you know, even on Facebook. They'll invite me to their property in Illinois or Iowa. I don't do that. I don't take advantage of my position. I wrote 3 books on bow hunting pressure property, produced instructional DVDs. YouTube's all about hunting pressure property. Got 53 book bucks, you know, 33 from Michigan, 20 from out of state. Everything's been off free permission, public or walk on. And I do not cross that line. And it is so easy for most hunters, once they get a little bit of notoriety and they get offers to go places where it's much easier, they do that. And I know that bow hunting is such an egotistical activity that as soon as I would go on a pay to hunt place or something that's managed and kill a big buck and post it and say it was off managed property or something like that, oh, well, John's just, you know, probably most of his deer came off managed property.
Legacy's out the window.
Yeah, exactly. So I have stood by what I've preached, tried to be as honest as I can and try to pass on as much good information. And that's kind of what I have done. And it hasn't been easy. I will say that, because there's a lot of offers where, you know, you can go in 3 days and kill a 150-inch deer. And I never do that. I never take them on.
So, John, I guess, and this is something that we had a discussion on our last podcast with a couple different guests about, that kind of intrigues me is obviously you moved up to the north. You know, you started hunting there. For a lot of people, they hunt public land simply because there is no access to anything else, right? If they want to hunt, the only place they can hunt is public, right? They don't have relations. Maybe they don't knock on doors, or they got turned down, whatever it might be. For you, and maybe talk us through the transition in your career to where you are now. Has it always been like, I just want to hunt these pressured deer, or at one point in time was it, well, this is my only option to hunt?
No, I've always wanted to hunt pressured deer.
Interesting.
I have always wanted to hunt pressured deer. I've never wanted the easy route out. When I first, when I was like 13, I walked into this archery shop in Ypsilanti, Michigan, Southern Michigan. And there was the owner of the shop was standing in there shooting his recurve, because that's obviously in the 60s, that's all I had. And he was like hitting a 3-inch bullseye at 20 yards every time. We were the only two in the building. And I said, "Do you whitetail hunt? You hunt for whitetails?" Because I was always enamored by whitetails. I don't know why, because nobody in my family hunted. I self-taught. And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Man, you must kill a lot of deer." And he said, "Son," and back then in Southern Michigan, there wasn't a lot of deer. Okay, there was a lot in Northern Michigan, but not in Southern Michigan. Just like back in the 60s, there wasn't hardly any deer in Kansas and Iowa,
right.
Southern Illinois, in the big farm country. And he said, "Son, I've shot at six deer, not butts, just deer.
Mm-hmm.
They've all been closer than that target, and I've yet to touch the first one." He said, "You put fur on it and I just lose it." And what you said, Jeremy, a while ago, when you get to the point where you don't get nerved up when you're shooting at a deer, you need to raise your criteria or something, because that should always be there. That I hadn't shot a buck in Michigan in 3 seasons, and this year I killed 2 bucks in Michigan, and the first one I was rattled big time. I mean, I was shaking. I mean, I got a tremor. I shake naturally, but I mean, I was way beyond myself.
Worse than usual.
Yes.
That's
yeah,
funny.
and I had not seen a shooter buck in Michigan in 3 full seasons.
Wow.
But John,
Yeah.
I think this question might help me wrap my head around some of the stuff we've been talking about here. What is your goal? You know, I guess as it relates to the animal, is it an age class? Is it an antler class? Is it just a book buck? Or what are you looking for out of that experience?
I don't look at age class. I'm an antler guy. I know a lot of managed property guys, they hunt per age class.
Yeah.
But I look at bucks that I try to shoot at bucks that are going to make what. That's my goal. Now in northern Michigan, my criteria is a little bit lower because up in northern Michigan, we got a lot of sandy soil. And,
Yep.
it may take. I've shot 5-year-olds up here that were dressed up 220 pounds. They had 105-inch rat.
Right.
We just don't get big antlers up here. Southern Michigan's a little bit better, so my criteria in northern Michigan is a little lower than what it would be in southern Michigan. And then when I go to Kansas or Iowa or Missouri, my standards go up to 150 or bigger.
So like in your part of Michigan, would you say you're hunting primarily permission or public?
I'd say it's about 50-50 public.
50?
This year I shot 1 on public and 1 on private in Michigan. And then the one I shot in Kansas was on free walk-on property.
Yep.
Okay.
Walking.
And so would you say like you're fairly tied to those places that you have access, and within those areas, you're just looking for the best antlered buck you can find in either of those locations?
Yes, I'm hunting what I would presume would be, one of the bigger bucks on the property.
Yeah.
And as far as private, I've probably had over my hunting career, I would stay in Michigan alone, probably 100 different parcels of private, because you're always getting it and losing it. The kids grow up and they want to hunt it, or you kill a big buck and the property owner shows a picture to somebody, and then somebody else that's a friend or relative wants to hunt it and you're out. And so when you're hunting free free permission, you're always losing and gaining, trying to gain new. And as far as public, there's a lot of public lands I've scouted in Michigan where I would never set foot on it because the property was just not conducive for a mature buck daytime activity.
Yeah.
So the property dictates whether I would even hunt it or not.
I think
that's
that's
so interesting.
Yeah. Well, you're fine. I mean, Jared and I talk about it all the time, and I love that now some of our listeners are actually catching on. Is like you can't kill a big buck if he's not there, right? So when you talk about, I guess
not only if he's not there. Let me interrupt you for a second.
No, go for
not
it.
only if he's not there, you can't kill him if he is there, but the property's not conducive for daytime movements.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what do you pose the question? What do you do in that scenario? Like if you know he's not there and that property's not conducive for daylight, do you just not hunt him?
I mean, if I know he is there, and
Yeah, I'm sorry. Correct.
I just abandon the property.
Wow.
If it's public, because there's lots of public land. Yeah,
Interesting.
it's gotta have the right security cover. Because mature bucks, when you're in a pressured area, everything revolves around security cover.
Yep.
A buck is not going to walk through open timber during daylight hours unless he's with a hot doe.
Mm-hmm.
He's just not going to do it. So you could have a primary scrape area from hell over here, let's say over here, and then you've got 200 yards of open timber, and then there's a swamp over here, which is where that buck is going to be bedding. It's a waste of time hunting that scrape area during daylight hours because that buck is not going to leave that bedding area and walk through that open timber to that scrape area during daylight, or he's not going to come to that. He's not going to early in the morning, just before daylight or right at crack of daylight. He's not going to work that scrape area and then go through that open timber, and after dawn in the morning.
Yep.
So if it's not conducive, or if it doesn't have this proper transition security cover from the bedding area to the scrape area or to the white oaks or to an apple tree, if it doesn't have the proper transition security cover from a bedding area to a destination location, it's worthless for daytime hunting in a pressured area.
So,
out west, it's totally different. They'll walk across, I've seen them walk across 2-inch winter wheat fields.
Yeah.
So, but in that scenario, I assume you're saying that because you've got a finite amount of time to hunt. So why waste time hunting a deer that you feel you can't kill?
Exactly.
Interesting. I'm just so intrigued by, and so for reference, your mindset is the same as my uncle's, who was like probably my biggest bow hunting inspiration.
That's because he listened to John all the
as
time
I was
growing
coming
up.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so to this day, my uncle and I butt heads like you wouldn't believe. And he's like my best friend. So like it's a positive thing. But you know, this property that we hunt in eastern central Ohio is my folks' place. And he is very like, hey, I will take, you know, the best antlered buck that I can get off of this place. So he's like, you know, going out and getting new ground is not really an option. And it's not really about age for him. You know, I'm going to look for the best antlered buck on that farm. That's what he wants. And it's just really interesting because I'm not that way, you know, and there's a lot of overlap here because I understand, as I know you and my uncle does too, that like age equals antler size. I understand that not all old bucks have big antlers, but generally speaking, you know, a buck is going to show what he's got at 4, 5, 6 years old.
Absolutely.
It's not debated necessarily. Although there are variations. It goes up and down, but and so, and I've had some influence by like Midwest Whitetail was a show that like I got into when I was in my late teens, early 20s. I was inspired by that show. And, you know, Bill, who we've had on the podcast, is someone who hunts for age class. And to me,
he hunts managed properties.
And managed properties. Yep. 100% in Iowa.
Yeah.
Ultra
Only Iowa. He doesn't leave Iowa. His home farm managed 100%. Sure. To me, that made a lot of sense because, you know, if you were to say, well, if you kill a 120, like what's next? A 130. Okay, then a 140. Eventually, you run out, you know, and it's hard to continue on that path. Whereas, you know, I see if I set the goal as a mature buck, regardless of antler size, it's a very high bar. First of all, it's tough to kill that, you know, in a lot of different parts of the country. But I don't feel like I have to continue to press it. Like you can't go from 4 to 5 to, there is an end there. Do you know what I mean? And so I found myself like settling into that pool, I guess.
But you can't. Bill Winke's opportunity options are in the top 1% of the country.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay. He's got lots and lots of opportunities.
Yeah.
So I could see somebody like him doing that.
Yeah.
I think he hunted in Michigan one year and he did.
Well, he's originally, lived in Michigan for a long time. That's where Pam's from, his wife.
If I remember right, I don't even think
you're saying Pam?
I don't even think he killed a 100-inch buck when he was.
Maybe not. And Bill's a super humble guy. I mean, he'll be the first one to tell you, like, yeah, I'm hunting managed ground that, you know, he spends a lot of time doing.
And to that point, I feel like maybe you kind of fell into what I said earlier, which is you're watching Bill Winke and what Bill's doing and saying, oh, I should be able to do this on my farm. And we now know that you can.
Well, see, and this is where John and I took different paths here. And I don't think either one of them is right or wrong, but like, and there's a whole class of guys that will say, all right, I'm going to go with what the land can give me, you know, the best antlered or whatever your goal is. And I'm just stubborn, I guess, to where I'm like, well, no, I'm going to
force it.
My goal is to kill a mature buck. And so I'm going to go and do whatever I have to do if that's go to get permission 10 minutes down the road or move to Iowa. You know, that's.
Well, so I was going to ask John, just because I think there's a way that this kind of intersects together is, John, how many bucks would you say your book bucks, just in ballpark, that were, I guess, 3 and under? Would you say there's a large chunk of them, or were most of them over 3?
I doubt any of them were under 3. I think they were all 3.5 year old.
Okay. That's what I was.
And I don't think they're, I mean, in Michigan, you can kill a 125. It's got to be at least 4 years old.
What were you hoping that would
in northern Michigan, 3.5 year old bucks up here don't have 125 inch.
So he's killing mostly 4 and older deer, which is where you're at now.
Yeah. So when I go out west, though,
different. Yeah, I can.
160 inch.
Exactly. I'm just talking about where John is at. He's essentially, even though he's looking at it from a book perspective and antler size, he's pretty much killing the same thing that you're killing from an age perspective.
Yeah, by default, the fact that those antlers are smaller forces you into that age
Correct.
class.
Different if he was obviously in Iowa or Kansas or something, because we'll all see 150-inch 3-year-olds.
Well,
and I also think, I mean, and I may be wrong, Bill would have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most managed people let people come in and call, inferior genetic antlered bucks. So typically when they're hunting, when the owner of the managed property is hunting for a specific age class, they're going to have big antlers because they've been culling the inferior antlered bucks out of there via letting somebody else come in and kill deer.
Yep. I think he does do that.
Yeah, well, I think a lot, depending on property side, I think a lot of people do, because obviously you can't just not kill bucks. If you just don't kill bucks, eventually you end up with a 5-year-old 6-point that just beats the hell out of every other buck on the property,
Yeah, well, and that's the benefit to Iowa. Bill's got 3 tags, so he'll shoot.
Yep.
There was a year probably he shot a 200-inch buck, a 175, and probably like a 135, whatever it was, call buck compared to his biggest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's interesting how those kind of come together. The other thing that, and we talked to Don Higgins not too long ago, is, John, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, when the season opens, if you've got a chance at a buck, you go after it, right?
Yes.
Where I'm
not the type of guy that goes out there and looks for deer.
Yeah.
I'm pretty much a sign hunter, but if I know there's a big buck in a specific area, yeah, I definitely go after it. I knew there was a big buck on the private property I shot in Michigan this year, and I shot him on the 3rd day of season. I rattled him in out of the standing cornfield.
Wow.
So I was after that deer.
And I say that, where I'm going.
Well, where my mind went was, do you know Don Higgins?
I know who he is. Yeah.
Well, so when you said that, my mind went to you remember what he said? He's like, I don't look at sign at all. None. He's like, I know what buck is there, and I'm going to kill it based on terrain.
He's got cameras everywhere, and he's hunting managed property.
Well, I think that's the next logical question is, what role do cameras play in your strategy?
Not a lot. I put out cameras now, probably prior to 4 or 5 years ago. I never used cameras in Michigan. I mean, every location I hunt out of state has a camera.
Right.
I mean, I actually put a camera at a hunting location out of state, every single one. And we hunt, me and my boys, when we're in Kansas. We hunt according to what's on the camera, kind of like Don Higgins is doing, and I'm sure Bill Winke's doing. That is just so simple to do. I mean, that takes very minimal hunting skill, in my opinion.
It's freaking hard for me, John. I'm having a tough time with it over here.
Well, if you got cameras and you got bucks that are coming in on a consistent time frame, then if you go sit in a specific stand, you're going to have that opportunity more than likely, other than during the peak rut when, they're going to be with those and all rhythms and, routines go out the window.
Yep.
But typically, during pre-rut, they're on a pretty healthy routine, and early season, they're on a routine. So, if you own managed property and you have zero competition like those guys do, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to kill the biggest bucks on your property every year, because you can put cameras out. The deer tolerate a lot of human odor because there's, Don or Bill is out on the property a lot. They tolerate their odor. They tolerate their intrusions. Basically, they never get shot at until they hit that kill criteria, which is 3 or 4 years old. So any interactions they've had with those guys growing up has been no consequences. So they have no reason to change their movement habits during the daylight hours. It's a totally different game.
Yeah.
Totally 100% different. Those guys have zero competition, just like the sports icons. If I was the only quarterback in the NFL, even at my size, I'd be the best one, wouldn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you say, because, I mean, obviously when I grew up, I don't know, when you started hunting, did you have trail cameras like right away?
No.
So like, obviously for most of my growing up, like trail cameras didn't exist. And so, I was kind of forced to read sign and, look at track size and be like, okay, this is obviously a big buck track, or this is a small buck track and stuff. So John, I look at that as like the buck that you killed this year that you rattled out of the cornfield.
Spotting is how we did it. In PA, we could drive around in spotlight.
Spotlight.
Yeah.
Yep. You knew
I did that a lot in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah. You knew there was a buck there. But you didn't really know how big of a buck. You just knew he was probably a big buck.
No, I had him on camera.
You did have him on camera. Okay. So you knew.
I didn't have a camera out at my tree where I was hunting,
Right.
but I had a camera just as an inventory keeper.
So from that inventory keeper, you were able to say, okay, this is the buck I want to kill on this property.
Yes, I put that camera on a scrape area, like probably early September as soon as I found the scrape on my pre-season speed tour, I put a camera on it, and then I got a picture of him, and then that's the buck I pursued, and then I killed him on my first hunt, and that's fine.
Do you find that you kill a lot of your bucks on the first hunt?
Usually the first sit's the best at a specific location, but typically when I'm hunting, over the years, I haven't known what's there. I'm hunting the best sign. I'm looking for rubs that are, really high up on the tree, or I'm looking at primary scrape areas. And again, everything has to revolve around the adequate security cover at the kill location, and it has to have adequate transition security cover to a known bedding area. So I hunt sign, and I think people that hunt in the normal blue collar way and on public land and stuff like that, they have to hunt sign.
Right.
You can't hunt just cameras because you just can't do it. It just doesn't work. It's totally 100% night and day different from managed property.
Well, and I think even on some managed property from the camera, we've talked about this on this podcast before, like sometimes I rely too heavily on my cameras, and frankly, I miss a ton of opportunities, right? Because I'm literally hoping the deer walks in front of this camera to say, okay, he's there at this time. Meanwhile, the last 4 days, he could walk right behind the camera.
Yeah, it depends on where you're putting your camera. See, typically, when you find scrapes early in the year, and I'm over 50% of the bucks I've shot have been at a scrape area,
wow.
A primary scrape area where there's multiple scrapes.
Wow.
And so when you find those scrape areas and you put a camera on them, and you put the camera up in a place where the deer are not going to see it, maybe 10 feet up in the tree, a different tree shining on that camera. Typically, scrapes will give you a really good inventory of what's there. Now, if you just have a camera on, let's say, some sort of let's say it's at a white oak or something,
yeah,
and if you put a camera low where a deer can visually see it, I honestly think big bucks will avoid them in pressured areas.
Sure.
Obviously, on Don Higgins' property and Bill Winke's property, they don't,
right?
Because they've never had any consequences for 3 or 4 or 5 years until they get shot.
Yeah.
So they when there's no consequences, there's no reason to change your patterns.
Do you put scent in your scrapes?
I never use scents. I never use commercial scents. I may take a tarsal that I've cut off a deer and rub it in a scrape as a buck scent.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I don't buy commercial scents. I used to rep for Tinks, and so I could get all my stuff for free, and I never used any of that stuff because it's bottled and it has bacteria in it, and it doesn't smell quite the same. So I like my locations to work on the merits I chose them for. I don't like boogering them up with commercial stuff, because everybody, that's another thing, when you're on pressured land, everybody's using scents. So you want to do things opposite of what your competition's doing, because mature deer catch on to that. They've listened to rattling. They've listened to faulty rattling. They've had experiences with decoys or faulty scents or calling, where somebody's doing a grunt call every 5 minutes. And they just know. They've been there, done that. And they just know when to respond to things or when not.
Yeah. How about mock scrapes? Do you ever put those in? And if so, I guess how would you do so without, scent?
I think mock scrapes work very, very well. I've done it in the past, but I live so far. My closest hunting spot's like 40 minutes from my house.
Okay.
So I really don't have time to do that stuff. If I lived close by, I would definitely use mock scrapes for sure. And mock scrapes should always be put where you're seeing a lot of doe activity, because that's where they're going to do the best.
Okay. Can we circle back just to, talk about reading sign? And can you care to elaborate just on what exactly you're looking for and how you're using that information?
When I'm I do what's called a preseason speed tour.
I've heard of this.
So I do all of my scouting and location preparation. It's always done by the end of April in the spring.
Okay.
Even going back to my older locations, re-grooming the shooting lanes if it's on private property, even on public property. When you groom your shooting lanes in the spring, and then when you go back and hunt it in the fall, if somebody came by and said, well, you're not supposed to cut shooting length. Well, I didn't cut them. Somebody cut them 6 months ago. I didn't.
Yeah. Obviously wasn't me.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
So, I regroom all my stuff, and it's all done by the end of April. And then I do these speed tours. And I always do the speed tours after September 20th, because Michigan's bow opener is October 1. Most of your 2.5-year-old and older bucks are rubbed out by September 5th at the very latest.
Yep.
So they've had 2.5 weeks to lay sign, buck rubs, possibly scrapes or whatever. So when I do my speed tour, what I'm doing is I'm checking my old primary scrape areas that I may have hunted in the past, or I may be checking a primary scrape area that I found and set up on during that previous postseason, or I'm checking my old white oaks or apple trees to see if they have mast or fruit production that year, because all that stuff changes from year to year. So I'm checking all of my locations, and I'm mentally noting the sign. And so if I see if there's an apple tree, okay, this apple tree's got apples, or this white oak has acorn. Typically, because there's a 2.5-week gap from when they've rubbed out, there's going to be sign around. If they're feeding at it, and does are feeding at it, bucks are probably feeding at it as well. So there's going to be rubs in the area, and there's probably going to be a scrape or two here and there. So I'm reading my sign. I'm looking for rubs that are not, like 2.5 feet off the ground. I'm looking for rubs that are up 3.5, 4, possibly even tine tickles on the tree up to 5 feet, because as bucks mature, they get taller and their antlers get taller. So obviously the rubs are going to be up higher. So that's going to dictate whether it's a mature buck or not. And scrape areas are the same way. Typically, when you're doing a preseason speed tour, if there's active scrapes, if scrapes are opened up, usually your bucks that have been through at least one breeding season are the ones that open up those early scrapes. So I'll know, okay, I'm going to mark this spot. This is an active scrape. There's 2, 3 of these scrapes opened up. This is a spot I'm going to put on my early season rotation. So I'm looking at all my sign. That's how I'm looking at my sign. I look at my sign from my preseason speed tours, which are typically designed for what I'm going to hunt during the early season. And then I'll pick out my best trees that I'm going to hunt according to what kind of sign was there. Because I'll go into season with 50, probably on average, 50 trees prepped for my saddle.
Wow.
And I'll probably only hunt a dozen of them during the course of the season based on, mass production, fruit production, or the scrape area is active, crop rotations change things. There's just a lot of different things that change deer movements from one year to the next. So I'll hunt them according to what I see on that.
Just because you said, where did we end on?
Oh, you're just talking about looking for that sign, and I was gonna go ahead.
Well, you said you had you might hunt 12 of those 50 spots throughout the year. I'm curious, from year to year, do you have, obviously, and you don't have to tell us, do you have honey hole spots that you're like, this spot typically I've got a shooter buck around?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mature bucks gravitate to certain locations and certain bedding areas because they have the most adequate security cover, or there may be, pre-rut scrape area locations that are better than other scrape area locations just because it's got the adequate security cover. It's close to let's say a standing cornfield where they got security cover of the standing corn. So there is definitely, I have honey hole spots from year to year. Yeah. And bedding, to me, my best honey holes are almost 100% within bedding areas.
Yeah.
I hunt a lot of interiors of bedding areas. So like when I was talking earlier and I said there's going to be, maybe there's a scrape area over here, and the scrape area has a lot of perimeter security cover around it. So the scrape area itself is adequate for a mature buck to be at because he feels secure because of the security cover around it. But there's no security cover transitioning to it from a bedding area.
Mm-hmm.
There's an excellent chance if the bedding area was accessible to me as far as entry and exit routes without spooking a lot of deer on them, going in the morning, I would hunt within the bedding area but I usually only hunt bedding areas during pre-rut.
So that was one of the first things that I had come across from you, John, was just because so many people are, and including myself, usually super cautious early in the season and kind of get more aggressive as the season goes on. your philosophy is, you know, if the things kind of align to hunt interior bedding, could be on opening day.
It's pretty rare I hunt bedding areas early in the season.
Okay.
Because I don't want to spook anything out of them. I hunt bedding areas primarily during the rut phases because that's when mature bucks are actually starting, their testosterone levels rising. That's when they're actually starting to look for estrus does. So bedding areas are where does bed. That's where bucks are going to go in and start looking. And during the rut phases, you know, there's so many people that leave bedding areas as sanctuary.
Yeah.
And that I do not understand. Because if I wanted to kill you, my best place to wait would be probably in the closet.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, you're going to be there every night. Now, during the rut phases, mature bucks, the dominant bucks, they're going to try and push does, estrus does, into bedding areas. So, you know, a lot of guys will hunt the perimeter of bedding areas. I've heard this 1,000 times. Yeah, let's hunt the perimeter of this bedding area, and I could hear deer in there moving around and chasing around in the middle of the day, but they never came out. Duh, why did they need to come out? They got the hot doe in the bedding area. You know, they're going to breed her. She's going to lay down. He may bed 10 or 15 yards downwind of her. When 20 minutes, 30 minutes go by, he'll get up, he'll go over and center, and she'll usually stand up and run 30, 40 yards, and they'll breed her again. And that cycle goes on throughout the whole day in that bedding area. So why would you not want to be on the interior of a bedding area during rut phases? Because that's where all the deer activity is happening. You have to have a really good scent control regimen.
Well, that's what I was going to go next.
So, John, what do you say to guys that are like, and I've seen it, you know, bucks that will cruise the downwind side of a bedding area? Like, I know that happens. So, like, how does that factor into your strategy for hunting bedding areas?
Well, if they're in the bedding area, they're not cruising the downwind side of a bedding area unless it's a really tiny bedding area. So, I mean, I'm talking bedding areas. I'm talking, you know, decent sized 5, 10, 20 acre bedding areas. Or on public land, it could be a couple 100-acre bedding areas.
Okay.
So I'm just getting in the interior, and I always postseason scouted those out. Where I go in postseason, I can spook every deer out of there for a week straight. I can be in there daylight till dark for a week, run every deer out of there. But I'm looking for areas where the most runways converge. Maybe there's a little open area and a bunch of security cover. There's definitely going to be sign in that little opening.
Yeah.
And deer feel comfortable moving during daylight hours when they're in the security cover of a bedding area.
Yeah.
Whereas outside of that bedding area, they're a lot less likely to be moving during daylight hours. Pressure area.
Yeah, no doubt. I guess the reason for the question, it makes sense hearing the type of habitat that you're hunting. Like my family farm in Ohio is like, there's not a bedding area bigger than 2 or 3 acres. Yep. You know, at most, like these are knobs, these are hillsides. And so pretty frequently, you know, to say they're in the bedding area, it's like literally, you would look into the bedding area and it's like, I could see them running around in there.
Oh, okay.
Very frequently, you know, I do see bucks that will cruise the downwind side of it because easily they can smell the whole thing without having to
be in it,
you know, go through busting through brush and stuff. And so, you know, we've seen some success with that, but that answers that question though.
There's a solution to that because scrape areas are the same way.
Yeah.
When I'm setting up on a primary scrape area during postseason, when I'm prepping a location, I will almost always, if there is a tree on the south or southeast side of a primary scrape area, and this will be the same as that little bedding area you're talking about, I'll set a tree up maybe 20 yards downwind because winds usually out of the north or the northwest. That's where the predominant winds are in the fall. I'll set something up 20 yards to 25 yards downwind of the actual scrapes themselves. And then I will also clear a shooting lane 25 to 30 yards southeast of my tree. So now if a buck comes in, and this usually happens in the middle of the day, if a buck comes in, he will scent check that scrape area without physically going to it. Yeah. So he can come any place between that scrape area and 50 yards downwind, I've got a shot. Yeah. You kind of follow what I'm saying?
I do.
I've got a 25-yard shot through the scrape area, 25 downwind my tree.
Man, there's like...
And I've got several big bucks in Michigan in the middle of the day doing that exact same.
In the middle of the day.
Same as your bedding area.
So, and I assume you're looking for a weather pattern or a weather front to pull something like that off?
Yes. Even though I personally don't pay attention to wind, I never get winded. I don't pay attention to my wind. Yeah, when I'm going to hunt that tree, I'm going to look to hunt it during a northwest wind, where a buck would be scent checking it on the side of the tree or the side of the scrapes where I'm hunting.
I mean, this.
Well, we have to go to scent now.
Well, this is the category, right? Because this is one of the things that this is the John Eberhart is. You don't pay attention to your wind.
Never. No, wind is irrelevant as far as me worrying about me getting winded. I started using ScentLok in 1990s. I think it was 97. And by 1999, it took me about 2 years. I got to the point where I learned how to properly care for it, because the way they tell you doesn't. I've never found the way that they tell you to do it on the hang tag to work. Okay. Yeah. So I learned how to properly care for it. I learned how to properly store it, and I learned how to properly use it. And I learned what to use in conjunction with it, where I don't pay attention to wind. When I'm walking in, I can touch vegetation, walk through cattails, walk through weeds, brush against my clothes. Irrelevant, totally irrelevant. As long as I got my ScentLok gloves on, where I'm touching stuff with that as well. And obviously I'm wearing rubber boots. Can't wear leather or cordura boots. But I pay zero attention to wind, and I don't even look. I mean, even when I get ready to shoot at a deer, I have no idea if it's downwind, because I just don't even think about it. And for the first 35 years I hunted, I paid 100% attention to wind direction. So when I sit here and say I don't pay attention to wind, I'm not an idiot that,
Sure, right.
Clearly. I had 35 years.
I'm not crazy.
totally paying attention to the wind. And there were years where, I quit hunting sides of ridges. I quit hunting undulations. I quit hunting saddles. There was years I didn't get to hunt my best rut phase locations because the wind was never wrong. The wind was never correct on the days I had off work, because that's a pretty short period of time for rut and rut.
Yeah.
So being able to go anywhere you want at any time and not pay attention to wind direction is a monstrous advantage.
What was
why people don't take advantage of it?
I want to hear more about his process, if you're willing to share.
I kind of want to ask first, like, what was your epiphany there? Like, can you pinpoint something in your head when you started using that stuff that you were like, wait a minute? Like,
yes.
What was it?
I actually did tests. I did tests. When I got to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm having deer go downwind me, they're not smelling me. I actually did a couple tests. One of them was really interesting. I had this piece on public land, and there was a doe and a fawn that was coming out in the exact same spot, coming out of the cedar swamp, going into a private hayfield next to the public land. But she had to transition through like 200 yards of public to get to the fence to cross into the hayfield. So my tree was on the south side of the runway. The runway was about 20 yards from my tree. So, and usually the wind's out of the north. That's why I was on that side.
Right.
I was thinking about wind direction. So I waited for a southerly wind just to do this test. And it was also during mid-October, when the likelihood of a big buck coming was pretty close to zero. It was during the October lull. So the first day I sat there, we had a due south wind, and it was warm, obviously, because the wind was out of south. And that doe and fawn came out, and when she was walking down that runway, just browsing on the vegetation, and when she got due north of me, it was like somebody smacked her in the face, man. She just came alert and turned and looked right in the direction of the tree I was in. And then she snorted and turned around and ran back into the swamp. The next day, the next afternoon, I got in the same tree, and I was hoping the same doe came back, and I wore ScentLok. And that deer came out exactly the same time, went right by me, never lifted her head, her and her fawn browsed, and went right out into that hayfield, and kept going. And then another time I was hunting right on the edge of some cattails, and I was in a hemlock tree, and I was probably 10 yards from the actual cattails. They were going into the cattails to bed. And this was on a morning hunt. And it was probably 8 o'clock in the morning, and there was 3 does and 2 fawns. And they came by me. They went by me, and they were right on the edge of those cattails. And one of the does visualized me. She actually turned around, and she was looking, when they were browsing, they were kind of looking around anyway. She noticed me up in this hemlock, because this hemlock They're not like a white pine or
Yeah.
with needles everywhere. They're kind of open.
Yep.
And she picked me in the tree. And at the time she did, she was on the upwind side of me. She was not downwind of me. She had already came through the downwind side, and now she was going into cattails, which was on the upwind. So she went around my tree. And when she did, these other does started to follow her too, because they're nervous, because she was nervous. She was the lead doe. And they walked around my tree 20 yards directly downwind of me. And they're standing there with their, with their nose up in the air. They're trying to win me because that one doe can see me and I am not moving a muscle.
Mm-hmm.
And they finally just walked back around and met up with their fawns and went into the cattails. And I have deer downwind of me all the time.
So for sake of getting to the bottom of this thing, which I think we're going to intend to here, I'll come out and say, I have been smelled in ScentLok.
Yes.
So clearly you're doing something. Your process is what's yielding that result.
Most people that have bought ScentLok and use ScentLok have been winded in ScentLok.
Yep.
I will give you that.
Yep.
And if you watch TV shows or you go by what ScentLok has on their hang tags, you are probably going to get winded. The TV guys have no clue how to use ScentLok. Okay. They wear a jacket and they wear a pair of pants and they have their gloves on. Then they wear a logo cap. Their hair's hanging out. They got beards.
So what do they say? What's on the hang tag that says, what's the procedure?
The hang tag says to wash your clothing, and you should not wash your clothing.
Okay.
You should not wash your clothing. Washing your clothing, the liquid detergent actually plugs the pores in the activated carbon. The pores in activated carbon are microscopically small, okay? So it doesn't take a whole lot of liquid to plug those pores. And also the washing the suits breaks down the glue that the activated carbon liner is sandwiched between the two pieces of fabric. So once you break down that glue, that carbon moves around in there. So then you're going to have areas where there's no carbon.
Okay.
You kind of follow what I'm saying?
Yep.
And you have to wear rubber boots, and you can't wear new rubber boots. I always let boots season a year or two before I'll even wear them hunting. I'll wear them scouting and stuff, but I won't wear them hunting because they have a strong rubber odor, which is a foreign odor to a pressured deer. Out west, it wouldn't make any difference, but in a Michigan or PA, it's going to matter, because it's a foreign odor, and a foreign odor will alter a mature buck's movements during daylight hours. So, I just deabsorb my clothes in the dryer. It's got to be a clean dryer. So I'll usually wash some towels in scent-free detergent, run them through the dryer cycle. Then I'll throw my ScentLok clothing in there, just ScentLok. It's always by itself. And then I'll run it for usually 40 minutes on a high heat setting, which is usually the timer cycle. And I'll set it on 40 minutes. And then as soon as it comes out of the dryer, it goes into an airtight tub. And then it goes into my minivan. And the only time I put it on is when I'm changing into it. And then when I come back from hunting, it comes off and goes right back into that tub. So it's never exposed to the air. When you talk to guys, they hang it outside. They think hanging it outside is going to help it, like it would on regular clothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Activated carbon doesn't know you're hunting or you're not hunting. It's absorbing 100% of the time. It's exposed to whatever molecules are in the air. It's always absorbing. So the care is very important, and you have to wear a head cover with a drop down face mask. 40% of your odor comes out of your head. So if you got an exposed face, you're wearing stinky face paint, you got hair hanging down below a hat, even if you're wearing a ScentLok ball cap and you got hair hanging down, your scent control is gone.
Yep.
You have to do it all. It would help. You may get rid of 70% of your odor if you just wear a ScentLok cap. 50% of your body odor is coming out of your face, your beard, and your neck. It's like driving a car on 3 tires. You could drive it, but it doesn't work as well as when it's got all 4 tires.
Yep.
So you have to do it all correctly to not pay attention to wind at all. And very few people are detail oriented enough to do that. You have to be a detailed person. So this isn't something. So
not my dad is what you're saying.
You can't fudge corners and expect it to work.
Right.
But if you do it right, and
my dad has a ScentLok suit, I'm pretty sure.
I have a bunch of ScentLok documents, and I almost hate saying it because I'm really getting tired of sending them. I've probably sent 1,000 of them out in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I've got a canned set of documents for scent control. And if somebody emails me just scent control regiment, I'll send it to them.
Okay.
So
How often do you reactivate?
and my emails on my website. So if somebody wants to email,
Oh yeah, and here come the emails. How often do you reactivate the carbon in the dryer?
It totally depends on the time of year. Depends on how much you're sweating.
Mhm.
Like early season, where you're going to perspire a lot more, and you're not going to have on a bunch of undergarments. I usually do mine every 2 hunts.
Wow.
Okay. If I'm perspiring a little bit, every 2 hunts.
Okay.
When you get later into the season, okay, now you got your suit on, you got maybe a merino wool base underneath, and then one other layer underneath your jacket and your pants. Every 4 hunts, probably. And then when it gets into the really late season, and you may have a heated vest on and a heavier merino wool, every 6 hunts.
Got it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, you hear, and everybody, this goes back to everybody's kind of got their opinion, right? You hear somebody like a Don Higgins who like literally will not go into an area unless the wind is correct.
Well, I would say that's a majority of guys are on the side of the wind matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd say 95%. Yeah, absolutely.
What's your take?
If I was in Don Higgins' position and I wasn't wearing ScentLok, I would totally
just because it's in line with this kind of don't worry about the wind, any opinions on the ozone things?
I'm not a big ozone fan as far as using it on my ScentLok garments because ozone has a foreign odor.
Mm-hmm.
I would never even consider using an overhead ozone machine. I know a guy that's TV show was sponsored by that. And while that ozone machine was on all the time when he was on TV, when he uses it on his property in Michigan, he gets busted all the time, even by year and a half old.
Yeah, I've used it in passing. I got busted.
Well, I mean, I'll be the first to say like I smell it, and like my nose isn't as good as a deer. Like I would think that they smell it as just foreign.
Is it a foreign smell though? Because isn't ozone? I mean, at least when I've heard it spoken about.
If it's after a storm, it's not so foreign. After you get a rainstorm, there's that supposedly that ozone type of odor out there.
Yeah.
But you gotta keep in mind when you're hunting a pressured animal, you're hunting a totally different animal than Don Higgins or Bill Winke's.
Yeah.
You're not hunting a pressured animal.
Yeah.
And a pressured animal, when you're looking at a 4 or 5 year old, 3 or 4 year old buck in a pressured area, anything that's out of the ordinary when he's moving through the woods is going to alter his mindset going to continue on in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter what the foreign odor is, it's not supposed to be there. So it's going to change his mindset. When you're in an area where there's been no consequences for a deer until he's 4 or 5 years old, he's going to accept a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the guy I'm talking about, when he was using his ozone overhead machine, he shot lots of bucks out of state and on beta hunt ranches.
Yeah. That makes sense. I think that, obviously from an assumption, the fact that you're not paying attention to the wind as much, John, would say that you probably put yourself in a lot more positions to harvest a deer versus guys like us, frankly, who like I'm looking at the forecast for a week out and I'm like, oh, no northwest. Like I'm done. Like
can't hunt
there.
Big time. Absolutely. Well, you can't go in and hunt a bedding area on an all day sit where you're in there an hour and a half before daylight to beat the deer into the bedding area and then leave a half hour after dark. So you're leaving after they leave without having deer downwinded yet. It's impossible. When you're on bedding areas, deer are going to be around you from any direction.
Right.
So you can't do that if you have to pay attention to the wind.
What would you say, John, just in regards to, I guess, the statement that a mature buck, any deer, frankly, will they use the wind, right? And frankly, they probably travel according to, or in a way that they can stay downwind of something that they're trying to approach. So if it's a corn pile, scrape area, whatever it is, you'd agree that, let's just say mature bucks, for the sake of our conversation, are going to try to approach that from downwind, correct?
I think anytime a mature buck is coming towards a destination location, they're going to try and do it from the wind. But for people that say deer always move according to wind direction, Well, if you have the same wind direction
Yeah.
for 5 days, the deer is going to end up 5 miles in one direction.
Right.
Okay. So,
Can't be
deer do
downwind of
not-
everything at all times.
Yeah, he's always going to be walking in the same direction. If the wind's blowing the same direction for 4 or 5 days. So that's BS. But yeah, whenever they're coming into a destination location where there's, especially any place where there's potential danger, they're going to play the wind. It's just like coyote hunt.
Yep.
You go try and call coyotes out in PA or Michigan or West Virginia, and you're in an area with security cover or timber, they're going to always come in from downwind.
Yep.
They're going to always circle downwind. You go out to Kansas, you call coyotes across big open areas, they come in from whatever direction they're at. So it's totally different.
And so your claim to basically say like, hey, I don't pay attention to the wind at all. That's basically to make a point about your scent control tactic and that it works, not necessarily to say that a buck isn't gonna come in from downwind.
Yes. When I say I don't pay attention to wind, I'm not worried about me.
Yep.
A deer would be me.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Which I would say most people are, right? When most people think about hunting the wind, frankly, I don't think that most people pay attention enough to how a buck will approach something because of the wind as much as, well, I'm just worried about my downwind, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think most people, when they're talking about the wind, they're worried about their wind swooping deer downwind of them.
Yeah.
And I know lots and lots and lots of guys that pay no attention to wind that I've, got into my scent control. I'm talking. And I've got tons of testimonials on my website. I actually quit putting them on there 10 years ago because I just got tired of putting them on my website. So
I'd love to read some of those, be exposed to that. Cause I mean, Jeremy and I are still getting smelled and we're paying attention to the wind and we're curious.
Well, and I'm not nearly as aggressive as I would like to be because of conscientiously thinking, well, I can't hunt here because it's going to blow down here. And then thermals are sinking here.
It's everything.
Whatever.
It's everything.
Oh, it's everything. Yeah. Thermals and without a doubt.
Well, and
think
about
morning, swirling winds.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Think about the overcomplication, because the fact is, when you're thinking about your wind and then having to think about position of a deer approaching the wind direction, and then using that to determine, hey, here's the best tree. There's so many dynamics there that, frankly,
Dude,
you're spun sideways.
I can remember, so this would have been 6, 7, 8 years ago for me, if that long ago, when I started first really paying attention to that stuff. Like I was like, oh, in my mind, wind is so important, like, scent control, and I'm going to approach with this wind. I can remember when that didn't work out, like the wind wasn't doing what I wanted, which was 90% of the time. I got to where I was going and I was like, I was so mad. I can remember just being in a tree stand, just pissed off that the wind wasn't cooperating.
Yeah, it happens to everybody.
I was pissed.
Wind swirling is huge. I mean, back in my day when I used to, I laugh at the milkweed thing because I used milkweed in the 70s. I mean, that is so old school.
Pretty innovative, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, when you're hunting, a lot of guys hunt crop field edges. I never hunt crop field edges in Michigan. I will out west, but not in Michigan. And, when you got foliage, shoot, the wind, if there's any kind of an angling wind hitting a tree line, a certain percentage of that is going to turn and go down to the corner. And if there's a corner, then it's going to make a swirl in that corner.
Yep.
I mean, foliage alters wind direction.
No doubt.
Big time. And then when you get in saddles and ridges and thermals and swirls, I used to hunt where, the wind would change every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, and once you're in a tree and you're committed, throwing milkweed up what good is it?
Yeah.
You're already there. What are you going to do? Get down and move?
Right.
Yeah.
So not having to pay attention to wind direction is a monstrous deal. And it gives you way more opportunities. Well, there's 2 things in my career that have made night and day difference on me killing book bucks. And it's been hunting out of a saddle since 81 and scent control.
Well, that's where I was going to go next is, you talk about the freedom from not have to worrying about your own scent. You're, in my opinion, and I don't know, maybe fact check it, you're the original saddle guy, right? At least from an understanding of...
Well, I told you before we started, I mentioned to my uncle, I think, who looks up to you, and he's like, that's the saddle guy, right?
Yeah. And so, like, we're talking about, like, because, what would we say? Maybe here in the last 3-4 years, this kind of saddle craze, John, I guess, would be what I would call it, kind of has really picked up momentum. Sure. You're talking 40 years ago.
I started saddle hunting in 1981. I bought this thing in a sporting goods store, and it was a bunch of seatbelt straps and tied together with a lead strap. And I bought it. Nobody knew what it was that worked in the store. Nobody could tell me anything about it. I just saw a picture on the cover, kind of a stick figure picture of this guy up in a tree, and he could move around the tree 360. He could hunt bigger trees. He just had a lot of freedom. And it was back then, stands were really creaky and big and cumbersome. And, the idea that I could prep 50 trees and hunt every tree with the same saddle setup whenever I wanted to. And I never had to worry about it creaking. I was always tethered to the tree, so it's far safer than a tree stand. I can shoot and move around the tree. I can move around the tree to hide my body. I can shoot 360 degrees around any tree. I can hunt trees that big around. I can hunt trees that big around. I can hunt trees that lean. Nobody's going to steal my stand on public land if I leave it there. Nobody's going to hunt out of it if I'm not there. The advantages are just so many. You tend to hunt higher also when you hunt out of the saddle, because once you get comfortable in a saddle, when you first get up in a saddle and you let go of the rope, it's like, whoa, you think you're going to fall because it's different. It's like a consumer power guy hanging on a pole, but they're so safe and they're so easy to use. And, when you're hunting at let's say a destination location, like at a scrape area or at a white oak tree or at a feeding location, when you prep the tree, you always prep the tree where you're going to be 180 degrees on the opposite side of the tree from the destination kill zone. So if there's, let's say you're at an oak tree and there's 4 or 5 deer come in and they're all feeding under this oak for 20 minutes, you're not going to get picked. Mm-hmm. When you put a metal stand up there, you have to kick it off to the side. So you've got that shot. If you were on the back side of the tree and it was very big diameter, you couldn't shoot to the destination spot. So you got to be kicked off to the side where you are likely going to get picked, or more a higher opportunity to get picked, because, you're sticking out. And there's those deer, when they eat, they don't just keep their heads down on the ground. When they pick up a piece of an apple or an acorn, they lift their head up or feet up. They're looking around for danger, and their ears are moving all the time. So, being able to hide behind the tree and then slide to the side, just swing slightly to the side when your shot opportunity is there to take the shot, it's a big deal. Or being able to move around the tree as deer are going by that you don't want to shoot. Or, as a big buck's coming in, and let's say you're in your saddle, you're hanging from the tree, and here comes this buck in from this direction. You move around the tree. You literally lift your bow up, put it on a hook on the back side of the tree. You move around to this side of the tree. And then as this buck comes, you just swing around over to the opposite side. Now you got the tree as a buffer, so he can't visually see you. You just swing over to the side. And when he's right in here, you just take that quartering to your shot. So there's just so many advantages to a saddle. And once you feel safe in it, you'll find yourself hunting a lot higher, where you're going to be out of their peripheral vision, with a lot less chance of getting picked in a transition zone.
I think that's one thing that, even with this, like, call it the new saddle craze that I see, when I see somebody using it, I'm like, that's not really a true advantage. And it's simply because they're putting a platform, just like I would put a hang on, off the side of the tree, and they're not utilizing that tree as cover, right?
You are 100%.
They're still sticking out like a sore thumb. In fact, the first time I was ever in a saddle, I'm sitting on the side and I'm like, man, I feel like I'm sticking out more than I would if I was in a lock on, until you realize like you need to know how to work that tree to your favor.
That's one of the major problems I have with YouTube. There's so many guys on YouTube that don't have a clue what they're doing out of the saddle.
Yeah.
And almost everybody is standing on a platform.
Yeah.
If you're on a platform and you're in a standard size tree that's like 14 to 16 inches diameter, you have zero advantage standing on the leading edge of a platform. In fact, I think it's more of a disadvantage.
That's what I'm saying.
Being on a tree stand where your body is physically up against the tree trunk.
100%. That's what throws me off, John. I see people doing this and I'm like, how is this an advantage? Like, I feel like I'm sticking out like crazy. Like, they're clearly going to see me, versus in a lock on, I'm using like up against the tree as a blending cover.
You're absolutely correct. So because a tree stand guy, he can stand up on his platform on a standard size tree and shoot to the other side of the tree on a smaller tree.
Yeah.
Oh, and when you're in a saddle and you're standing on the leading edge of a platform, your body is literally 24 inches away from the tree, making it much easier to get picked.
Yes.
And if you were sitting in a tree stand with your upper body's tight against the tree.
Yes.
So you have to have the ring of steps. To me, people that are not using a ring of steps, which is basically steps all the way around the tree at the level you're standing.
It's like a strap, and it's got steps all the way around it.
It doesn't have to be a strap. It can be screw-ins. But they make for public land, it'd have to be a strap-on. Yep. Cranford makes a strap-on ring, or screw-ins. And basically, there's steps every 8 to 10 inches. So you can easily, without even looking at the steps, you just easily move around the tree, keep the tree as a hiding buffer, or for different shot opportunities at different angles. And on a bigger tree, if you're hunting a tree this big around, obviously it's going to require more steps for your ring. But you want to keep the steps 8 to 10 inch gaps and no wider than that. So you can, when you're moving around the tree, it's very easy and very fluid. So you're not making any hard, rigid movements.
Right.
So on those steps, John, to avoid that, leaning out away from the tree, are you just like standing on the steps and trying to just like lean against the tree almost, or are you still leaning back into your saddle?
Nope, you would be, if I'm standing on the steps, typically when you are properly on steps, you're going to have a step between your legs that's empty.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. So your legs are going to be somewhat straddling a normal sized tree.
Gotcha.
And your knees are going to be somewhat bent with most of your weight in your ass.
Yep.
You're not going to have a lot of weight in your feet if you're doing it right. It's all going to be butt. That's what the seat's for.
Yep.
Then when you want to take your shot, I always maneuver around the tree and keep the tree as a buffer. And then when I want to take my shot, I keep my feet on whatever steps I'm on to keep the tree at 180 between me. And then when I want to take my shot, I may take my left foot and move it to a step over there. And then you just lean out and take your shot.
Got it.
Well, it seems like that, whatever we call it, the wheel of steps. Is that what it's called?
Ring.
It's called a ring.
Ring of steps. That seems like kind of the ticket, because I know I've hunted out of, we've got some hawk saddles and they work pretty good, but it's got a platform in front. Well, this is my first experience with them. I feel like I'm sticking way out from the tree, and there's no way for me to get my feet on the sides of it, and so my knees end up like against the tree the whole time.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was being an ass.
No, but seriously, because it feels like we're uncomfortable in some of these situations. Which
the hawk, let me tell you something. Hawk replicated tethered's mantis. Okay, Tethered doesn't make the mantis anymore for a very specific reason. It's a very poorly designed saddle. Okay, the hawk and the mantis, they're both single panel saddles.
Mm-hmm.
When you fidget, they ride up your back. You're constantly lifting your weight up, pulling it back under your ass.
Sounds familiar.
Constantly.
Yes.
And they're not comfortable. There's way better saddles out there than that. I have a signature saddle, which is a 2-panel, which never rides up. But just to clarify that, there's a Cruiser makes a saddle, Tethered Phantom. That's another awesome single panel saddle. The Hawk is one of the most poorly designed saddles on the market.
Noted.
It would definitely give you a bad experience. So don't.
Okay.
Interesting.
Please don't relate the Hawk saddle to what other saddles are out there, because it's a night day difference. But the ring is, when you're on a platform and that's all you have, and you don't have platforms are fine if you want to put steps in conjunction with it around the backside of the tree, so that you can step off that platform and move around the tree, keep the tree as a hiding buffer, and then slide to the side and shoot. That's fine. But to just have a platform, it's just like what Jeremy said. You're just limited.
Yeah, I feel like I always, in just how I was raised, I used the tree to the advantage to either blend in and break up my outline, or to use it in between me and the deer, however it was. And when I see a lot of these people in this new saddle craze doing stuff, I'm like, yeah, I see you. Like, you're out at a 45-degree angle of the tree. Like, clearly,
I see you, bitch.
Like, I see you. Yeah.
I see you.
Gotcha. Like, it's not, well, and so that's why, like, And John, that's one of the reasons why you're on here is because there's a lot of bad information that is being put out in this industry nowadays. And frankly, something like saddles that I think could be very useful to a lot of people. Somebody watches the wrong thing and just uses a platform and is out 45 degrees, they're going to get busted every time.
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct. And there is a lot of bad information. And most guys you see on a saddle now that are using a platform, they've got their feet on the leading edge. And basically their legs are straight. And then they bitch because their feet get sore.
Yeah, 100%.
A saddle has a seat in it for a reason. It's to sit in. You know, so when you're hunting out of a saddle properly, and when I say properly, I'm talking with ring steps.
Yep.
Your feet are on steps and kind of to the side of the tree, a little bit sideways on the tree, and your legs are, you know, your knees might be touching the tree or possibly straddling. And so most of your weight, I like to have like 80% of my weight is in my butt. I'm sitting.
Wow.
You know, 10% on my feet. When I'm sitting in my saddle, I can lift the foot up with no problem and hold it there for 10 seconds.
That sounds
not
better.
Much weight in my
Well,
feet.
and I was going to say, and you mentioned that one, there's several others I have tried saddle wise, and most of them probably are the single panel, I would assume. I feel like there's too much pressure in my hips, which sounds like a woman, but you know, do you get?
John's like, no.
But, yeah,
Two panel saddles don't ride up and they don't pinch your hips, because two panel saddles, basically you got two different panels and you can overlap them to make a 6-inch seat.
okay.
Or you can spread them apart however you want them. You can have a 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. You can have the one panel underneath your ass and the other panel can be up above your waist in your lower back.
I
You can
gotcha.
adjust that however you want it.
Oh.
So in that lower panel, that inner panel, no matter how you fidget, that stays under your butt. It's right up there at the crease of your butt cheeks. It stays there. It never, ever moves.
That makes
Two
way more
panel
sense.
saddles or single panel saddles are like this. This may sound gross, but I'm going to tell it anyway.
I've heard that before.
But here we go.
You know, humans have butts.
We do.
And you got two separate
What?
butt cheeks, okay?
You have
when
two
you're in-
You have butt?
You have two separate butt cheeks. And so when you're in a single panel saddle, whenever you fidget or when you're walking or whatever, you know, your butt cheeks move independently of each other,
Yeah.
especially when you're hunting. And this is why they ride up. Whenever you fidget or you squeeze your ass cheeks, one butt cheek will go up higher than the other, and it'll slowly, maybe a 16th or a 32nd of an inch at a time, as your butt cheeks move, it pulls that saddle up into your waist.
Yeah.
And when you're pulling the top of the saddle up, it's pulling the bottom of the saddle out from under your ass.
Mm.
So that's why you're always lifting it up and pulling it back under your butt, because your butt cheeks move while you're fidgeting or whatever you're doing.
I think it just pinches my butt cheeks to where I can't get a fart out.
Yeah. Yeah. Then your cheeks started swelling up.
Like farting in waiters, man. You're stuck. Anyway, two panels don't.
But that makes sense.
Makes perfect
You understand
sense.
what I'm saying? Like I feel so
Yeah,
much
I
pressure
get
here
it.
that it's just not comfortable to sit
Wow,
in.
dude, when I was hunting out of a single panel saddle, it felt like I couldn't get those thigh straps tight enough. I was like, how do I have
because
to,
it was riding
do
up.
I have to tighten these things to keep it? Yeah, because it kept riding up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that
You're
makes a lot of
talking
sense.
about those little cup seats on the side.
Yes.
Yeah, that's they put those there because single panel saddles they ride up all the time. They put those little adjustments there to try and keep that cupped under your butt.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it
Your butt
doesn't
cheeks
sit.
are gonna move. It's gonna climb them.
Especially my butt. My wife's told me it's quite large.
Mm.
Got a Kim Kardashian.
There you go. You have to get the extra large.
Yeah, well, I've been training for the mule deer hunt,
Oh,
so
I
yeah,
gotcha.
I'm stepping on that stair stepper with 100 pounds on my
I
back.
gotcha. But
I have several saddle YouTube videos on my
Cool.
well, and that's so
channel.
when you would prep a stand. So let's say back in the day, and it probably differed private versus public. But when you would prep a tree to sit, would you have the ring of steps there already?
Typically, if it's on private, yeah. When I climb the tree, that's all set.
It's already
On
set
public-
up.
Yeah, on public, obviously.
Yeah.
With strap-ons, I'm not leaving strap-on stuff in the tree. because
Right.
Mm-hmm.
On public, it's going to get stolen.
Interesting.
So I prep it when I go there.
So, John, what's the major obstacle that saddle hunters have with their hunting apparel. And if you want to use that to kind of segue into what you're telling us about before the podcast, that might be a good spot for it.
Well, I guess I don't understand what you mean problem with their hunting apparel.
Well, so you're talking about coming out with something new that's going to solve the issue that
Yes.
people are having with their apparel.
And this is basically going to be for guys that use ScentLok.
Well,
ScentLok
apparently it seems like that's the one that everybody should be using if we don't have to worry about getting detected.
If they get my documents, then you guys email me yourself.
The documents.
I'll send them to you. You read through that. You'll understand activated carbon. You'll understand everything about the technology.
Just for the sake of doing it right now, John, can you email us those documents? You have my email. You don't have to do it right now, but I wanted to ask you right
I'm
now.
making a note. Yes.
Send us the documents.
I have never been tied to someone. Okay.
Yep.
So there's not been any monetary reason for me to endorse ScentLok other than it works and not paying attention to wind because I majored.
Okay.
But I can't say that for 2022 because ScentLok, I kind of teamed up with them last summer, and I went in there and designed it's going to be a John Eberhart signature ScentLok suit for 2022. And it's going to be primarily designed for saddle hunters. So the pockets are going to be a little bit higher on the jacket, knee pads.
How cool is that?
Built-in knee pads.
Props to ScentLok for picking up on that and doing something right there.
First time they've ever did a signature suit for anybody.
Very cool.
Yeah, man.
And I'm very geeked about it, and it's a very unique suit. It's gonna be awesome.
Do you have like I don't know if I want to call it proto or beta type? I mean, have you actually got your hands on it and you're like, yes, this is right?
I was there yesterday.
Oh, very cool.
They're holding meetings. They got like 10, 12 people in this conference room. They're looking at all their new 2022 prototype products. I was in a different room with the guy on mine, and yeah, it's pretty close to exactly what I want.
Can you tell us like any of the attributes of that suit that's unique to, like a standard ScentLok suit?
The leg pocket designs are different. It's going to have a two-way zipper. So the zipper will zip up from the bottom as well as from the top down. Obviously, knee pads in the pants that are permanent. It's going to have, the pants are going to have a little ride up thing in the back. So your jacket's going to override that, because it's a scent control piece. Collar is going to be a little bit unique. It's going to have a 3.5, 4-inch collar in the back, but it's going to taper under your ears, and it's going to be really short in the front because as a bow hunter, you're always turning your head.
Yep.
And these collars these guys make nowadays, they put everything's got a collar and
always in the way.
Yep.
Yeah, it's always in the way. So it's only an inch short in the front. It's going to have plenty of room in the arms for layer garments. So it's going to be a piece. It's going to have a little bit of thin slit in the body of the suit. And the pants, even though it's going to have belt loops, it's going to have a cinch pull in the front, like you'd have on a backpack backpack strap.
Oh, cool.
So it's going to be, you put the damn things on, you button it up in the top, and then you just grab that.
Cinch her down.
Or you can use a belt. So it will have belt loops, but there's going to be no reason to need a belt.
Yeah.
There's no butt pockets because you can't access a butt pocket when you're in a saddle anyway.
Yeah.
So they're not going to be there. It will still have the little hole in the back in case somebody wants to wear it in a tree stand.
Yeah. For safety harness.
That's some of the stuff I can think of.
Very cool.
Did they tell you, or do you know what camo patterns it's going to be in, or?
To be in Real Tree Extra.
Okay.
I wanted it to be. First off, I wanted it to be.
They didn't give you what you want.
They didn't.
This is the John Eberhart signature series we're talking about here. We'll go back in demand.
I wanted either Real Tree Escape or Paragila.
Yeah.
And it costs like twice as much for the fabric. So
that's not your problem. That's ScentLok's problem.
Yeah, it sounds like somebody else had to figure that out.
So the retail wasn't so high.
Yeah.
So, and in reality, I mean, patterns are patterns and they look good cosmetically. Yeah. I love that Paragila, and I love the new Real Tree Escape that came out last year. But typically in a saddle, at least for me, I'm hunting at a height where camo's not that big a deal. I'm always hiding behind trees anyway.
Yep.
I was going to ask you that.
It's a good the real tree extra is a nice pattern.
I was going to ask you that, John, just in terms of patterns and stuff, you know, because Jared and I, frankly, have used Predator. We like that blocky kind of open pattern.
We've used it all, man. Mossy oak, real tree.
Yeah, I mean, we've used
all
everybody.
over the board.
Yeah, and so I wondered if, you know, and again, I keep this in mind of your hunting style is using that tree basically as your blocker anyways from a field of vision type of standpoint. But if you had not necessarily a pattern like real tree, but like a type of pattern, more open, blocky, or more condensed, dark.
If I had to pick one pattern for everything I hunted,
yeah.
Boy.
It's a lot of pressure.
I like that new Terragila and I like that new Realtree Escape, but Realtree Extra is the Mossy Oak Country is fine for me for everything. I mean, when I get into December and there's snow in the trees or there's no foliage in the trees, you know, I use that ScentLok Vertigo pattern a lot, which is
the old open. Yeah.
I think ultimately like good hardy apparel that, you know, is built for, you know, pocket access the right way that you want. It's way more important probably than the pattern.
And I say that because like, I don't know if I've found, like I love Predator's pattern, but in the early season or if I'm in like a dense woods or swamp, like it's not a good pattern for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, cause it's supposed to look like open area behind me. Like,
well,
you know,
it's
sky.
very white.
Yeah. Versus
first time I wore Predator. No, it wasn't Predator. It was ASAP.
Yeah.
Very similar.
Guy talked me into buying an ASAP suit, and the first time I wore it, I was in a pine tree. And this is going back years. I was in a pine tree, and I mean, I had a 6-point in Michigan public lane come out at least 100 yards, and he turned and looked right at me.
You look like a big snow owl out there.
Yeah, it was really. I was like, wow, this stuff sucks. But it was just I was in the wrong type, and I was just not in the right type of location for that pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is funny. Yeah, that's cool, man. Well, first of all, congrats to you. I mean, that's really cool to be able to put, you know, all of your thought and years of experience into a piece of apparel and especially very specific for the type of hunting that you do.
Yeah, and I thank you. I really appreciate that. I also want to say something else it is going to be windproof. So it has a polyurethane membrane in it, which makes it windproof, and that's why I wanted the fleece exterior to mask the noise of the membrane.
Oh, very nice.
It's windproof, and basically the whole body of the suit's going to be waterproof because it's all got a polyurethane membrane, which is a waterproof membrane, but it's not going to have tape seams. So if you're in a hard rain for a long period of time, it will eventually leak at the seams.
Gotcha.
I think I just discovered my uncle's next Christmas gift.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be bad.
Is he using a saddle yet?
Put me down. No.
Well, he wouldn't learn from he needs to watch John stuff anyways because everybody else will tell him how to do it wrong.
I guarantee his cop out would be I'm too old. And
bullshit, John 70.
and I would be ready with a rebuttal. Yeah.
My brother's 73 and he's still hunting out of the saddle.
That's awesome. Well, and I do think so tying that back into kind of mine and Jared's style of hunting is we do like to be very mobile, right? I mean, we like to be very fluid, whether it's public or even our private places, very fluid and very mobile. And we've done a ton of run and gun with lock-ons, right? I mean, that's really what we have been using. And it's simply because I don't know if we've tried the right saddle or like, I don't know enough about saddle hunting prior to this conversation.
We've just gotten comfortable with it. You know, I just feel really comfortable with a lock-on. I'm really good at hanging them, you know, and I figured out how to hunt out of them. I really haven't had any issues. Do you know what was weird for me was because I missed that whole in the 70s and 80s, like I realized saddles are not a new thing. So this recent craze, like within the past 3-4 years, it seemed to me was like mobility. I can go anywhere with this saddle. And, you know, so we went and got some. And the more that I hunted them out of them, I was like, this is not any easier to hang. Like I still essentially have to climb the tree with sticks, hang a platform to stand on, or, you know, as you're saying, wheel of steps, ring of steps. And then I have to get into it. I'm like, it's essentially more steps than just hanging the hang-on on the tree and getting into it. And so I didn't personally see that as an advantage as it stands right now, I think the main argument that someone would make to me that I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's sheer size
And weight.
and maybe weight, but I work out. So
Well, you got to
size.
look at the other. You got to look at the other advantages because you're limited to the trees you can hunt with a lock
Sure.
on.
Sure.
You're limited to diameters. You're limited to leans.
Yep.
You also, when you're carrying a lock on, it's cumbersome. You're also carrying a bow, and you're probably carrying a backpack, so
For
it's
sure.
cumbersome. And when you're hunting public lands in a pressured state,
Yeah.
you're bucking brush. You are not walking down a true track like Michael Waddell and
Mhm.
hanging a stand in an open timber lot and shooting 150-inch deer.
Yep.
That ain't happening to you.
Yep.
So you're bucking brush, and with stands and cumbersome stuff, that's definitely difficult to do. You're cussing and swearing. And also when you're in a stand, it's a potential something that could creak.
Yep.
I mean, the new stands nowadays don't creak that much, but it is a potential. Whereas with this saddle for freelancing, I shot my biggest buck on a freelance, on my 180 incher. You know, I was just walking through the woods, jumped in a spot where there was a primary scrape area and shot 180 incher.
Yep.
And I personally think it's easier. And I just think the advantages of finding a destination location, there's going to be a really high likelihood that there's going to be a tree that a saddle will work in that will be within shooting range of the destination spot. Whereas a lot of times with hang-ons, when I used hang-ons, I had to set up on sign leading to the destination spot because there wasn't a tree at it that would suit my stand. With the saddle, that's typically not a problem. So that's another big advantage. But
I'd
as
agree with
far
that.
as, you do have to put on some extra steps.
Sure.
That's the difference. And as opposed to pulling up a noisy stand on a rope or whatever and possibly making noise and spooking deer that are bedded within 50 yards, you're going to have to put on a ring of steps.
Yep.
Are you, I assume you're carrying in a set of sticks with you when you're hanging on public, or are you using tree branches, or how are you climbing up?
I use tree branches if they're available, as a step. I would never use a pine or a popple or a soft branch, because when you're coming down out of the tree after dark,
Yep.
Those branches tend to not give you a warning when they're going to snap.
Oh, yeah.
They just snap.
They go.
So I make sure I cut off anything that's, if I'm using steps, if there's a branch that's that big around, I make sure I cut it flush to the tree so I don't mistake it coming out of the tree as a step. But I'm going to be perfectly frank, and somebody's going to give me some crap for it. But a lot of times on public land, because I'm hunting so far back in the crap, I use screw-ins a lot.
Yep.
But if I'm in an area where it's going to be a little bit more open, or if there's snow on the ground where I can be tracked, I'm definitely using strap-on sticks. I'm using those tethered one sticks right now with aiders.
Yep.
But when I'm back in the crap, I usually have a fanny pack that I wear below my backpack, and it's got steps on it, either strap-on steps.
But John, you can't screw things in trees
I
on
was just
public
gonna
land.
say, I love those tips from John that have to do with they can't track me in the snow.
Yeah.
I could screw in my sticks,
Yeah.
cutting trees in the spring.
It's amazing. I mean, I get it. Like, I get the tree damage part to a point, but like, come on now.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I grew up with a bag full, like you're saying, John, a bag full of those 99-cent green sticks.
Wow,
or
it's one of
steps
those.
that just,
It's one of those.
Yeah.
You give them a minute, they take a mile. If you say, yeah, you can cut trees, you're gonna find the force has been timbered. Yeah.
And if you're using Ameristep steps,
Yeah.
talking about, those are the hardest steps to get into trees.
Oh God, man. I don't know how many, especially if like I'm layered up or something. I don't know how many cuss battles I've had with the tree in the past of like jamming that thing in and trying to like turn that thing.
Why? You know why they screw in so hard? Because they're painted.
Yeah.
Yes.
Those steps are painted. The threads are painted. And anytime you put a painted thread into a tree, the paint binds on the sap once you start getting into the meat of the tree. If you get Cranford screw-in steps, they're raw steel and they're pointed, they go in a tree really easy.
Yeah, we need some of them.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's I think that the thing that I've looked at, and it's just because how I started hunting and still even like when we were in Illinois and Kansas, we do it is, we try to get away from people. So, I mean, we're getting deep in there, and obviously the more gear you're lugging in, the bigger the pain in the ass it becomes.
For sure.
And so that's where, as this whole kind of saddle thing came back out, it was like, well, I mean, like that makes a ton of sense. Like that's when I should be using it. But yeah, it's just weird. And like, I guess it's just, again, some of the false information and content that gets thrown out there. I start watching people. I'm like, well, shit, that ain't any better than.
Well, and I think John is right to say, like, man, if you don't have the right saddle, just like I would say, if you don't have the right hang on, you're not going to have a good experience with it.
It's like back in the day when I would pack in a 35-pound Summit Climber. Like that thing was a pain in the ass to lug back in the woods.
Yeah.
You guys probably had, if you both had Hawks, you probably had the absolute worst saddle you could own. That is the most comfortable saddle on the market. Period. End of discussion.
So it can only get better from here, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You get a 2-panel saddle, whether it be my Eberhart signature through Tethered or Latitude's Method. Latitude makes a really good 2-panel saddle called the Method.
Okay.
I've actually got a video. I think it was my last saddle video on my YouTube channel. It's probably 4 videos back on how to use a 2-panel saddle, how to properly use a 2-panel saddle.
Well, so
once you use a 2-panel, you'll never look at a single panel.
See, that's what I was going to go to, John.
I had never even heard those words.
Yeah. Well,
before today.
Because of this new craze, like I have seen, like obviously we all know Tethered. We know, I've heard Latitude recently, Trophy Line, obviously. I don't know. Am I missing any other ones? Probably.
John mentioned some earlier. Cruiser. Hawk.
Yeah, Cruiser. Yeah.
And obviously Hawk.
And so, I mean, obviously people are kind of piggybacking off of this,
Sure.
This phase of things. My one, I guess, worry for that industry a little bit is like, unlike a lock-on usually, like I need multiple ones or I want to set those up. Like typically I just need one saddle, right? I mean, as long as I have one saddle, like I'm good. And if it's a good saddle, it should last me a while. Do you
I've hunted out of the same saddle since 1981.
Yeah,
okay.
Manufacturers don't like to hear that.
Well,
is where Jeremy's going with this.
But I'm saying that because like this craze is here, and as long as people are making good saddles, like there's only a finite amount of people to market to or that are gonna be saddle hunters. Like at some point, is there enough room for all these brands? I guess is what I'm getting at in the same space.
Well, you look at there's 11 million deer hunters, and they've probably barely scratched the surface. And this year's going to be an interesting year, because tree stand prices are going through the roof.
Oh, 100%.
Containers coming in from China and offshore.
Yeah, and steel's outrageous.
Steel's outrageous, and you got to keep this in mind. These containers coming in that are they went from like $2,500 a container in January before Biden took office. Now they're up 23, 25 grand per container.
Yep.
And when you're looking at tree stands and ladder stands, you can only put a few on a container.
Yep.
So each one, they're almost doubling in prices. I'm in the industry. I've been looking at prices.
Yeah, so we $600 for a ladder stand this year.
Are you telling us you voted for Biden to make saddles more affordable and more appealing?
Yes. Yeah, right. And I also want to say this. This is a pretty good way of putting public land hunting in pressured areas into perspective. When you're scouting public land during postseason, what you want, postseason gives you a really good look at what the land is, because all the foliage is down. It's going to look the same when you go back and hunt it during the rut as it does when you're scouting it.
Yep.
You go out preseason and everything looks a lot of security cover. And then when you go back and hunt it in November, everything's gone and it looks open. But when you're scouting during postseason and you're on public land, you want to think to yourself, where are the only places on this public land where I might feel comfortable getting up and moving during daylight hours if everybody that's hunting here is trying to kill me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what deer do. And those are the types of areas that hunters push deer into before season. Because even though I may do my scouting properly during postseason, so I'm not screwing and boogering stuff up during preseason, everybody else is public is scouting preseason and setting up their locations. So they're turning any 2.5 or 3.5-year-old bucks nocturnal before the season even opens.
Interesting.
But you want to always think, everybody's trying to kill me. Where's the only places I may move during daylight hours? That may require you to wear waders to cross a river, or a canoe to go up a river, or across a lake, or a kayak or something. You've got to go where other people are not willing to
That's pretty much clean. We've done it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I like the comparison a lot to like, because it's easy to think about, you know, you're saying from a safety perspective. I think about it from a pattern ability. I notice it in my daily routine, like just because I'm always thinking about deer hunting. I just take notice of things. I'm like, oh, I've been at my house like 3 times today, or, you know, I went down to the street and I did this. How many times in this week did I do that? And I try to like relate that to the life of, you know, a whitetail buck, and, you know, start to give some perspective on things. It's an easy way for me to think about it anyways.
If I just sat at the gym, I'd kill you pretty easily.
Right. Yeah. The gym, my house, you know, my refrigerator, especially. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're not looking at security cover. You know, it's kind of like, you know, where these big name guys that hunt managed property, you know, it's like you would feel comfortable walking through. What state are you guys in?
PA.
Yeah.
Virginia?
Pennsylvania.
You'd feel comfortable walking through some small rural town at 1:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
Would I assume that's correct?
Yes.
Sure.
I bet you would not walk through inner city Chicago in a crime-laden area at 1:00 in the morning, because you know there's a security issue there.
Yeah.
You know there's a possibility of danger. Deer think exactly the same way. They know where there's danger, and they avoid those places during daylight hours.
Yeah. John, do you think we as hunters underestimate the amount of daylight movement a mature buck does in some of these places? Just because we don't see it, it's not as visible.
Yeah, it's usually in heavy security cover areas. So yeah, we underestimate it because you don't see it. It's like just like midday hunting. You know, during rut phases, I hunt a lot of all day sits. But you don't just all day sit to say I'm all day sitting. You got to be in the right type of location with the right type of security cover.
Right.
It's got to be in a bedding area with security cover, or you got to be in a transition zone between bedding areas where there's adequate security cover for that transition for them to feel secure. So there is a lot of daytime movement by mature deer, but it's in areas where there's typically you're not going to see it.
Yeah. And I think probably not all of us, because John obviously doesn't do it, but I bet a lot of hunters focus too heavily on food sources and things like that, and not enough on that security cover. And so they're hunting food sources or damn near close to food sources, thinking eventually he's coming, but that's not necessarily in the daytime.
That's very true. A lot of hunters like to hunt field edges because they see deer. You know, to me, it's not about seeing deer; it's seeing the right deer during daylight hours.
Yep.
Yeah, and you know, destination feeding locations are fine as long as they have adequate security cover around the kill zone and adequate security cover to a bedding area.
Yeah. So, well, listen, man.
By the way, Jared, I can tell you work out. And
Thank
Jeremy, you're in pretty good shape. You two guys,
mean, I tend to work out.
If you guys got into a saddle and got the right saddle, you would never look at it.
Well, we're gonna keep in touch.
Guarantee you.
We're gonna keep in touch.
Probably looking at a John Eberhart series. I mean, seems to be the right way.
I'll walk you through it. It takes 10 more minutes to learn how to use it, but you'll never look at a single panel saddle once you do.
Okay.
I love it. Before we wrap up here, John, I obviously we mentioned YouTube a couple times. I hope everybody gets a chance to check out the new 2022 ScentLok suit that you're putting out as well. You and I talked before this. You've got some classes that, frankly, sounds like are about filled up, but just briefly kind of touch on those classes so that whether it's this year and or in future years, you know, some of our listeners might want to check those out and what you do during those classes.
Okay, they're 2-day classes. So the first day is out in the woods all day. We visit this is actually on a private piece. I couldn't do it on public because I'm not taking anybody to my public land pieces because of Onyx, obviously. So this is on a private piece. I've been hunting for a while, and we visit about 14 preset locations. So these are, this particular 37 acres of huntable land. It has swamps, it has funnels, it has pinch points, it has crops, has apple trees strewn throughout it. So it's got a lot of different looks. We talk about entry routes, exit routes for each location. Is this a morning spot? Is it an evening spot? Is it an early season location or is it a rut phase location? Could it be a midday location during the rut phases? We go over everything. I answer any questions. It blows my mind how some hunters don't understand entry and exits and how it's so important. And then anyway, on day 2, also at the end of that day, which usually lasts from about 8:15 till 4:30, on that same property, I will have with my 2 boys 3 trees set up like 18 to 24 inches off the ground with 3 different saddle setups. So one of them is going to be basically it's going to have a stick and a platform with a ring around the back from the platform, all at the same level. Another step's going to have screw-ins going up to it with a ring of screw-in steps. Another tree is going to have strap-on steps going up to a ring of strap-on steps. So there's going to be 3 different looks. Now, a lot of different types of saddles for people to try. And we spend about 3 hours there doing saddle demos. I welcome people to bring their own saddles, and I'll critique what they're doing. And you wouldn't believe some of the stuff people have brought. It's like you might as well carry 2, climbers that carry so much stuff. So, the point is I want to streamline everybody down, make it as simple as it can, make it as comfortable as it can, because there's so much YouTube stuff out there where if you sit the way they show you, it's not comfortable for a long sit. So we do that. And then the second day is an all-day seminar, basically, in Michigan's largest sporting goods store. And it's in their Outback room, which is a 200-seat auditorium. And it's all in nice office seats. And it's open for questions. I have all my scouting gear, location preparation gear. I have a lot of maps. I go over everything and anything to do with scent control. We talk about hunting pressure. I mean, I have a 52-page outline that we discuss, and I answer questions as well.
52-page outline.
Oh man, that's awesome. Well,
cool.
And they can go. What's the website to check that stuff out, John?
Okay, website. It's pretty simple. DEER, so deer, and then hyphen that little line. deer-john.net.
Got it.
deer-john.net.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Well, cool, man. Well, listen, again, truly honored to have you on, John. We're going to have to do this again at some point, maybe after you do your round of postseason scouting or something, to kind of fill us in on anything new that you found. And do you go to the archery trade show?
I do.
We'll be there in person.
I have 30 years.
We'll be there in person, and we'll have the podcast set up. Would love to, if you get 30 minutes to sit down and talk in person with us, that would be fantastic.
You know what? You got my cell number?
Yeah, I got it.
Give me a call. I'll have it on me.
Perfect.
Sounds good.
That's great, John. Well, listen, man, thank you so much for your time. Truly appreciate it. And just looking forward to getting you on again.
And if you want, I can get Ernie or Greg tethered over there and do a podcast too. If you want.
That'd be awesome.
That'd be fantastic.
Perfect. Well, thank you, sir. We appreciate it, and we'll be in touch soon.
I appreciate the opportunity, guys.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
You got it.
All right.
All right. Well, that was awesome.
Yeah, very cool.
I mean, first of all, dude doesn't look 70.
No, he looks great.
Yeah, that dude will outclimb me on a tree for sure.
Yeah.
But like just his experience and his expertise and what he's seen, like, the one thing that I know about John, and I've heard this in the industry several times, is people will say, he's pretty blunt about what, and it's like, well, yeah, man, he's got 55 seasons under his belt. Of course he's gonna be blunt. He's like, yeah, that doesn't work. This does work.
Yeah, time's limited. Like at that point, he'll probably just say the same thing. Listen, life's too short now to get to the point.
Yeah. So, but really cool, and the bow hunting pressured whitetails DVDs or books are really cool resources, and I think even obviously we hunt both, but I think sometimes we probably overthink or underestimate even the private access that we have, whether it's our own properties or properties we hunt with other people. And that I think a lot of his bow hunting pressured whitetail tips would be valid and applied to those private land settings too.
Oh yeah.
Is not just, I think that's one thing that I've heard from him.
Dude, as we've been saying, like to actually find an unpressured whitetail these days,
go to Kansas.
Oh, yeah, where are you gonna go? Yeah, you have to go to the Midwest, and even out there, it's getting slimmer and slimmer.
Yeah. So we obviously we appreciate John Eberhart being on. Cool to hear about his new ScentLok product that he's got coming out. He's obviously got the saddles with tethered. Did we get him at ATA in a booth? We'll have a blast. Cracking beers.
Really interesting to hear in the beginning too. Just like just different perspectives on why people hunt. Is, kind of an underlying theme to like our show here. And like I hope that ultimately gives people enough perspective to like learn to appreciate why other people hunt, and like we're not the only ones. And so like while I'm always on this topic of like, well, I've got this private land farm and I'm trying to hunt mature bucks, like I know that's not the only reason that the guys hunt, and it's definitely not like the right one, So John is a great example of, a kind of a different version of that. And so,
yeah, I mean, there's the guy I'm looking for, per our last conversation with Eric and Cody of, why would a guy hunt public when he could go hunt private? And it's like that guy loves it. It's cracked.
I know. What a perfect timing to have him on too, because I went into that with the mindset of like, yeah, who would do that? And he's like, that's what I do. That's what I do.
Yeah, and you can tell he loves it. But I think to me, there's a guy with 55 years of hunting under his belt, plus being in the industry, and just like you said this year, like he was a wreck when that buck came in. That's cool. That's what I want to do. When I'm his age, I hope I'm still like that. If I'm not, somebody should kick me in the balls because I've done something wrong.
Yeah, I'll be here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm younger than you, so I'll be around.
Thank you. Well, we appreciate everybody listening to HUNTR Podcast with John Eberhart. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, comment, tell us what you think. Make sure you leave comments or leave us a review, whatever, so you can enter the Stealth Cam Fusion X giveaway.
And as we said to John, if you're at ATA, our booth is 3607. Just swing by and check us out.
We'll be there live and in person.
Just say hi and yeah.
So Merry Christmas to everyone. If you're listening to this Christmas this weekend, and we will see you next time on the HUNTR Podcast.
Later.
Take me